So welcome friends, what if Deku was trained by Toshinori, Deku X Shōto's mother movie. Okay, enough of that. I brought down my hand and tapped on what I thought was the snooze button. But what I saw wasn't my arm. Not in the slightest. My muscles were never that big, even when I worked out extensively. My hand never looked that big either. Come to think of it, this wasn't even my room. The bed was too close to the ground, the style was Japanese, and where the hell was my computer? I sat up, looking around and trying to figure out what the hell was going on and how much of this was a dream. One thing was for sure though, I was fucking huge. Like I could outbench Gaston easily. Though, he would have more hair than me. Wait, where was my chest hair? I looked at my body, moving the red tank top, which I didn't remember ever owning, to the side and finding a few red chest hairs. A jolt of pain shot through me when I plucked one and brought it up to look at it. Holy crap, I'm a ginger. I brought my hands to my face, trying to see if I could feel something similar. Not that I knew how my face felt, but I did notice one thing that stood out. My glasses. I was seeing without my glasses. Perfectly. That was pretty cool. Okay. I slid my hands down my face and looked around the room trying to figure out what exactly was going on. I couldn't come up with anything. Not a damn thing. When I attempted to scratch my chin, I noticed something about my hand. It was on fire. No wonder it was so warm. When I tried to flick it out, the fire did nothing. It stayed there, clinging to my skin like a thin glove. If anything, it got larger, spreading up my arm. I tried to put it out with my other arm, but it was on fire too. Why was I on fire? Quick, stop, drop and roll. I did that, still fire. I rolled again, still fire. There was more fire, still more fire. I brought my arms up and stood touching my head and hoping that there wasn't even more fire there. Why am I on fire? Dad? I looked towards a sleepy-looking red-haired child looking at me. His name came to me instantly. Tuya. He was my son. Why are you screaming? Didn't you want to train me? Never had a kid before. I glanced around the room, hoping that I wasn't the only one in here. I was. Realization hit me like a truck as memories surged forth. Anger, lots of drive, motivation, of desperately trying to be better, to do better, to be stronger, faster, and all those other things as I strove to surpass all might. I swallowed, quickly using my quirk to put out the flames that covered my body. Even the ones on the ground dwindled quickly. No burn marks. Do you want to train today? That shocked the sleep out of his eyes. There was a bit of fear in his eyes as he looked at me. No? Oh, well, you can go back to bed, then, I'll see about breakfast. Crap, did I even know how to make a Japanese breakfast? More importantly, crap, I didn't know the first thing about Japanese culture. Sure, I knew a bit, but that was basic weeb stuff in no way applicable to their whole culture. I didn't even like their cuisine. I couldn't even read Japanese. Wait. I looked at Tuya's pajama shirt, which was of some cartoon, and realized I could make out the characters well enough, and could even read them. Convenient. I can? Tuya asked, his eyes lighting up as he all but bounced on his feet. I nodded. Yeah, unless you're too excited. Can I go get Fuyumi and watch cartoons with her and Mom? Is today a school day? No, it's Saturday. Great. One less thing to worry about. I smiled and nodded. Then sure, go ahead. But don't wake your mom up if she's sleeping all right. Okay. I waited for him to leave before I started to freak out again. Part of me knew exactly where everything was in this house. It had been mine for years now, a large traditional Japanese-style house right in the center of Tokyo. I had bought it after I saved someone from a villain attack and they offered it to me for cheap. Though, I really shouldn't say that I bought it. I wasn't the original owner of this body. I stepped into the bathroom, hoping against hope that I wasn't who I thought I was. The man that stared back at me was Enji Todoroki. The abusive asshole that was so driven to beat All Might that he forced a woman into marrying him to produce powerful children, and just a real grade a jackass. As far as I could tell, this wasn't a dream. I could still feel everything and I even had to use the restroom, but there wasn't much of Enji's personality left in me. Sure, we were both a bit on the angry side, but I wasn't him. Okay. I splashed myself with some water and tried to think. I remembered everything I could about myself, this world, and who everyone was. 25 years old, father of 2, husband to Rei, avid workouter, and the #2 pro hero in Japan. 25 years old, so Fuyumi was 3? And there were talks. Demands. With Rei about another child, that would be Natsuo, wouldn't it? That meant I was about 20 years from canon. In 5 years, Izuku and Shōto would both be born, and it would still be more than a decade before I knew what was going on. That was 20 years of butterfly effects to screw everything over. Hell. There was no way of even knowing when exactly I was supposed to have sex with Rei to make sure Natsuo or Shōto were born. Trying to keep things the same would be impossible. Besides, I rolled my neck and smiled at myself in the mirror. I always did say canon was boring, right? That sounded cooler in my head. Still, one thing is for certain, I can't do this on my own. I need to talk to All Might. I blinked, stroking my chin. Were we even friendly at this point? I could check my phone. And Nezu, if he's alive at this point. What were my options? What would it take to make that happy ending? Hopefully I remember everything right. 4x What kind of tea did Ray like? Was it too early for tea? What was I thinking? It was never too early for tea. Still, the question was, what kind of tea did Ray like? I searched through Enji's half of the memories and found that when it came to what his wife actually liked, it was pretty much limited to that one flower, and one thing that made her. I felt my cheeks warm and stowed that thought for later. Much later. Which tea was the most used? Or which one did we have the most of? I checked the pancake, smiling at the pancake making device that they had. It made those really fluffy looking perfect pancakes like no one's business. I already had 3 done, though I doubted that Fuyumi could eat a whole one at her age. Could she even eat a pancake? Should I have trusted Tuya with her? It was better than trusting me with her. Let's go with this one. I grabbed one of the boxes that we had for some reason. The open one was almost out of little tea packets and I started the process of brewing some up. I could recall Enji being a coffee drinker, and I could feel my tongue shrivel up at the thought of drinking something so bitter. Apparently, I didn't inherit his tastes. Which was probably a curse. A big curse. I was probably going to starve in Japan. From what I could tell, Enji left the cooking up to Ray. How was he not poisoned? Oh, right, money. And Ray was actually a nice person. I let out a sigh as I thought about Ray. She had a strong quirk, as powerful as my own, and she had wanted to be a hero. But her health was poor enough that she'd need medical treatment to keep living. That was how I got her. Money. Money for the treatment that gave her a normal life, at the cost of being a slave to Endeavor. I stared at the tea for a moment as I thought about what to do. Enji. I looked up and found myself struck dumb by Ray standing in the doorway. Her long white hair was full, giving her a cute almost pixie-like quality, while her face was just plain beautiful, and her gray eyes struck a nerve in me. A good nerve. Endeavor was a fool. Despite her beauty, Ray looked haunted. A ghost of fear loomed behind her as she took a careful step forward. Why are you here? She tilted her head, one eyebrow raised. And why are just your eyebrows on fire? Because I was really bad at controlling this thing and it's a miracle half of Japan wasn't currently on fire. I swiped my hand over my eyebrows and extinguished those flames before placing some tea down on the table and gesturing towards it like it was some grand prize. Good morning, Ray. I made you some tea. I'm not sure if it's the kind you like. I held up the box I pulled it out of and smiled. I also made pancakes. Ray's mouth dropped, but she moved closer, heading towards the teacup as she watched me with suspicious eyes. What happened to training Tuya? He said he didn't want to train. She shook, and grabbed the cup tightly. Oh, I'm sorry, I should have. He asked if he could watch cartoons with Fuyumi and I said yes. I scratched the back of my head, turning away from her as I felt an odd combination of adoration and guilt as I looked at her. While Enji hadn't hit her yet, there was a tension between us. And why wouldn't there be? She was effectively a breeding machine to Endeavor. Is that okay? Again Ray's mouth dropped and she held the cup a bit tighter before shaking her head. No, that's fine, Thank you. For giving him a break. Don't mention it. I placed a cooked pancake in front of her and shrugged. I don't really know if you like pancakes but. No, she blinked and shook her head. I mean, I do. She shook her head again, staring at the plate. They're fine, thanks. I'll go get Tuya and Fuyumi. I'm sure they'd love to eat with their mom. Their father, on the other hand. I couldn't remember ever even holding Fuyumi. Endeavor judged her too quick. She was a female, and that made her weak. Damn, I really ended up in an asshole, didn't I? I'm still thinking about having another kid, Ray whispered, still looking at her cup of tea. I'm sorry, but please, give me more time. Oh, I blinked, scratching the side of my cheek as I glanced at her. Such a haunted beauty. Sure, Ray had smiled before, but it was never because of Endeavor. Don't worry about that, we don't have to if you don't want to. Ray gasped. What? Are you sure, didn't we? Yeah, I paused before she brought up much of the past. I already felt guilty for everything. You might find this hard to believe, but I'm not going to force anything on you. Besides, I'm not sure if I want another kid either. I didn't even want the first two. Oh, Ray blinked, she took a sip of her drink. I see. I saw it then. For the first time as Enji, I saw her do something wonderful. She smiled. It was small, confident, charming, and made my heart beat faster. She was way out of my league. Well, I'll go get them. Your hair's on fire, she called as I left the room. I needed to fix that ASAP. I found Tuya and Fuyumi in the living room, Fuyumi laying on the floor staring up at her big brother while the little redhead sat way too close to the TV. He wasn't watching anime. He was watching the news. All Might had saved a bunch of people. Again. Hey, I started softly. Tuya jumped and quickly changed the channel. Sorry Dad, Fuyumi just. You like All Might, right? I asked, walking over to scoop Fuyumi up. This was another first for Enji. Was I supposed to carry 3-year-olds? She wasn't a baby, just like a big toddler, right? I should have paid more attention to my child development classes in college. Still, she could talk, right? Dad? Fuyumi asked, looking at me confused. I knew so little about her, but she wasn't struggling. That was good. Now to try and pretend I didn't write several stories of my now daughter in romantic relationships with some punk that wasn't even born yet. Tuya on the other hand looked scared. No, I mean, well yeah, everyone likes him, he's the best hero, but I think that. You don't have to lie to me, Tuya, you can say you like All Might. I won't get mad. Really? He asked with wide eyes. I don't know what happened to you, Dad, but you're awesome today. After breakfast, can we train? I want to be a hero like All Might one day. I laughed and nodded. Sounds good. Now hurry up and get to the kitchen, there's pancakes. Kids were easy. I watched as Tuya bolted out the door and headed towards the kitchen. Fuyumi followed him with her eyes. Do you want me to put you down? I asked her. Her head spun and she looked at me with wide blue eyes before nodding. I unleashed the Fuyumi and watched as she did that awkward toddler waddle run. They would probably appreciate some alone time with their mom. It wasn't something that I should pollute at the moment. Besides, I could eat my pancake in a minute. But right now I needed to make a call. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and scrolled through it looking for All Might's number. I didn't have to look far. There was at least one missed call each week from All Might. It was almost like he was my ex-girlfriend. Quick memory check proved that was a no, thank God. I hit redial and listened to the phone ring for a few moments. Would he even pick up? Should I wait for him to call me? How did that work with All Might? He seemed goofy enough that he'd be really excited that I'd be calling him. He might even. I turned the news on again and watched as All Might fought a villain. I could see him scrambling to pick up his phone. I hung up. He'd call me back after he was done. Before I could even take a step away, my phone started ringing. It was All Might. I sighed, watching him fight the villain with his phone pressed to his ear. Sure, he was the best hero, but wasn't this showing off? I answered. Endeavor, All Might shouted into the phone. Sorry I missed your call earlier. I was fighting a villain and was a bit distracted. You're still fighting a villain. What? No, I'm not. What makes you? I'm watching you on the news right now. Oh, that. This is just some fun, but what can I do for you? I watched as All Might all but obliterated the villain on the TV and even pausing to flash the camera the peace sign all on the phone with me. Do you think we can meet in person soon? There's a lot we need to talk about. I tried not to laugh as I thought about All Might acting like this. It was somehow both out of character and in character for him to just be so lax about actually fighting crime. Certainly, I know just the place. We can even do lunch if you prefer. How about at? Do you know Inezu? I asked before he could get to set on a place. And is there a place we can meet with him as well? A semi-awkward silence followed. How do you know about him? It's why I want to talk. Right. Meet me at UA at 3. Okay. In general, my life goal was pretty much just to not die, something that was pretty doable as a shut-in. However, given how my current occupation was that of a pro hero, that goal felt much more difficult to achieve. Especially as Endeavor, of all people. Underqualified was a great way to sum up how I was feeling. I let out a low growl as I examined Endeavor's hero suit. He'd wear it under everything when he went out, a classic workaholic. Though that wasn't the whole truth, Enji thought of himself more as Endeavor than he did as Enji. But in a world where being a hero is a full-time job, it probably wasn't uncommon. No doubt Toshinori thought of himself as All Might first and Toshinori second. I placed the suit back with its counterparts and stared at them for a moment more. In theory, all the training that Endeavor did was still in my mind, ready to be recalled at a moment's notice. But his instincts weren't. And my instincts were roughly the equivalent of a peanut butter sandwich in a room filled with begging dogs. Do I own a single tie that doesn't have flames on them? Each and every single one of my ties were some basic color with flames at the bottom. Even a white and black one I thought looked good turned out to have a black base with a white flame. Where was the fun? Screw it. There had to be a tie with pink on it. There wasn't. Ray stood at the doorway as I finished the last few buttons of my more professional suit. Ideally I'd be able to show up in a set of basketball shorts and a t-shirt, but this wasn't just a casual meeting between friends. Is there something happening? Ray asked, her hand barely touching the door frame. I have a meeting with All Might. That made Ray's eyes go wide. She gripped the door a bit harder, her hands shaking as she bit her lip. She was afraid. I wasn't used to seeing people be afraid of me, especially someone sweet like Ray. I hated it. But that wasn't something that was going to be fixed overnight. Any nice gesture I did for her might be suspect of having ulterior motives. Besides, I still needed to figure out exactly what I was going to do. Would it be alright if I take the kids to see my mother tonight? Ray barely managed to squeak out. Any previous time that Endeavor had met with All Might, he had come home angry. Angry enough to scare Ray. I smiled at her, and for a moment, surprise replaced her fear. If that's what you want, sure. I don't really know when I'll be back, so I was going to suggest you didn't have to cook for me. But going to see your mom sounds like a great idea. Hopefully in the future when I surprised her, she'd be smiling. Ray stopped shaking, her head tilted to the side for a moment as she looked rather confused. Somehow I feel like this whole day had been more confusing for her than it had been for me. And I was the one that had woken up in a giant flaming asshole. Seriously, I went from never married to a wife and 2 kids faster than I could have in Vegas.
Yes. We will. Thank you. Ray shook her head and bowed again, her soft footsteps echoed through the hallway.
Now back to struggling with my arch nemesis, tying a tie. I still needed to figure out what I was going to say, and what I was going to do. There were way too many moving parts for me to act, and even if I did, would I be able to do anything? Sure, I was Endeavor, but at the same time I wasn't. What could I even do today? List of heroes. Hawks was probably still in diapers. Or wait, wasn't he closer in age to Fuyumi or Tuya? What even was his first name anyways? Should have paid more attention to him. Vernon was like 6 or something. Mirko was about that age too. Eraserhead was probably being a problematic preteen somewhere in the world. Who else was there? Gang Orca. He looked old, but I honestly had no idea what his age was. I miss the wiki so much right now. Gran Torino might still be active, or more active at least. Should have asked All Might to drag him into this too. Hopefully Nezu and All Might would be able to help me with this. Then there was Natsuo. He was close to 20. That would mean Ray would likely have to be pregnant with him soon. The man in the mirror looked back at me, short red hair, blue eyes, and one hell of a resting bitch face all stuffed into a well-fitted suit and sealed with a badly tied tie. I looked like a mess. A bit of fire was on my head that was quickly snuffed out with a finger. A hot mess. Rolling my shoulders I set out for UA. I'm sorry Natsuo, but I won't force myself on her, though his character probably would have been okay with that. 4x Thanks to my experience with playing Persona 5's intro at least a dozen times, I had a decent idea of how the train system worked. I still almost got lost. Somehow, I managed to find my way to the UA gates. The locked gates. I moved over to the large keypad and scanner and stared at it for a moment. Endeavor had been here before. He was an alumni after all, having been from the first generation of heroes to graduate from the school after All Might's rise to fame. And what a rise to fame it was. The first year alone the crime rate dropped 10%. Look out below. All Might's cheerful voice told me that I was standing in completely the wrong spot as he came shooting down from the sky and landed right next to me. Honestly, the fact that I was 6 feet 5 now really didn't make All Might's towering height and mass any less impressive. With any luck, that would be All Might's form for a long time. The man greeted me with open arms and a wide smile. Much like myself, All Might had elected to wear a suit, the same one he later wore as a UA teacher, yellow pinstriped, and practically bursting from raw muscle. Endeavor, it's good to see you. I see you're as punctual as ever. I nodded. What the hell was I even supposed to say? Hi, I'm not really Endeavor and God you're huge. Thanks for agreeing to this. My pleasure. Though I must say that I am rather curious as to what this is all about. All Might opened the door with a few quick key presses. But we can talk inside, shall we? The bustling school life of UA reminded me that here in Japan a 6-day school week was considered the norm. Did Tuya lie to me? Why didn't Ray say anything? Why were there Saturday morning cartoons if there was Saturday school? Was that just for middle and high school? Anime did not prepare me for this. I must say the students here at UA are getting better every year. All Might walked with his shoulders back, as he exuded confidence. Just being next to him made me want to adjust my posture and stand tall beside him. What do you say later we show them what some real pros can do? I blinked, and briefly saw death flashing before my eyes. All Might would completely destroy me. Hell, half these students would destroy me. I didn't even know if I could fight. I could barely keep from setting myself on fire. Enji, you have a bit of flame on the top of your All Might held up his hand as though he was whispering. His blue eyes were focused on top of my head. He blinked and then reached out and I felt him snuff out a flame. I'll just take care of that for you. Ah, sorry about that, and thanks. I probably shouldn't have said that, let alone say it like that, nor smiled, because it made All Might's hand drop and he looked at me oddly. Right, well, Nezu is this way, right? All Might stood and shook his head. Not at all, he's on the top floor. He was getting ready to make himself known to the public, so I'm still a bit concerned as to how exactly you know of him. I'll explain what I can once we get somewhere private. All Might's smile was replaced with a frown for just a moment. Did something happen to you? I only nodded. The way All Might treated me changed slightly, from an overeager puppy that just wanted to play, to how a concerned father might act. In a way, it was sweet. In others, it just made me miss home. I had been to colleges before, sprawling campuses built on any flat spot they could find in the valleys and mountains of my home. But none quite compared to UA. The main building itself was like someone tried to turn an entire college into a skyscraper and succeeded, to say nothing of how absolutely small the ceilings made me feel. They had to be at least 20 feet high, maybe more. The view from the top made me all the more impressed by UA's general size, a campus so large that buses were often needed to go from one end to the other. It felt so fantastical and amazing. All Might lead me to a cozy-looking meeting with a set of couches flanking a coffee table. Nezu stood on the table, handling a large comparatively teapot with both hands as he poured a wonderful brew that had a bit of a crisp spicy niceness to it. Though, seeing the equivalent of a stuffed animal pouring tea was a bit on the odd side. Hello, Nezu, I bowed politely as I entered, staring at the creature perhaps a bit more intently than I should have. In person, Nezu was a lot less whole than he normally appeared. There were patches in his fur that were thin enough for his spotted skin to be seen underneath. That, or this Nezu had yet to fully recover from his past. Nezu placed the pot down carefully, before wiping his hands off on a cloth and looking up at me. He placed both hands behind his back. The suit he was wearing was well fitted, though the boots he wore reminded me of Izuku's gigantic red pair. I was reluctant to agree to this meeting, but Toshinori claimed you could be trusted, so my question to you is, how do you know me? That, I began, is a long story, and I do plan to explain everything to you. To both of you. I looked back to All Might and gave a half shrug, half smile, and gestured for the seats. I'm going to need both of your help with this. I see. Nezu placed his paw over his mouth and then hopped from the table to the couch. Well then, have a seat, and let's begin, shall we? I must say, I'm rather excited now that I've spoken to you. There must be so much on your mind for you to want to meet with All Might. I took my seat opposite the two of them, All Might towering over Nezu as the two took a sip of their tea so in sync that it might as well have been practiced. I took a sip and found that the crispness of the tea calmed me instantly. With a long, steady breath I thought about how to say this. I had been thinking about it for the longest time, but no way seemed good. It felt like no matter how I put the words that it would constantly fall flat on its face and leave a sour taste in my mouth. Well, it wasn't like I ever planned any of my stories to start with, might as well just talk and see what happens. One of the most important parts of telling a story was the hook. The thing that grabs the reader, listener, or viewer and sucks them in. Fortunately, I had a lot of hooks up my sleeve and All Might and Nezu were looking like very eager fish. I'm going to start with this. I took a deep breath and felt my hands shake as I prepared for the truth. I'm not the Endeavor you know. I'm not actually any Endeavor, really. I actually just woke up in his body this morning. I don't know how or even why, but the truth is that I'm not the man you know. They were both silent for a moment. All Might shifted in his seat, glancing at me with concern while Nezu folded his hands in his lap. Then what happened to Endeavor? All Might was the first to ask. I shrugged. I honestly don't know. I have his memories inside of me, and I can find his feelings in there, but as far as a persona there's only me in here. Felt good to use the word persona in a conversation not about the game. But, that's not all. You see, I'm not just some random person from this world that switched bodies with Endeavor, or even someone that took him over. Deep breath. Deep steady breath. It was time for the real wild part. In the world I'm from we don't have quirks, everyone is just a normal human. Mostly, but, in my world, there's a manga, one called My Hero Academia. It's set in this world, 20 years from now, and it follows your successor, All Might. Successor? Nezu questioned, looking up towards All Might. The color drained from All Might and I saw the first hints of the skinny malnourished man he could end up becoming. How much do you know? About One for All? I asked, watching his eyes go wider. His hands were balled into a fist, he was shaking. Probably more than you. Excuse me. What exactly is One for All? Nezu asked, raising his hand. I feel like understanding that would help me believe this is not some elaborate hoax. Now it was my turn to be surprised. 20 years from now Nezu knew about One for All. He was one of the ones trying to get All Might to pass on the quirk to Mirio after all. I looked towards All Might, and extended a weak hand in apology. Sorry, I thought he knew. All Might let out a long sigh and relaxed. It's alright, I'm sure if what you say is true, then he must eventually know. Though I find a lot of this hard to believe. Is there something more you can tell me? Your name is Toshinori Yagi. You were born quirkless but still wanted to be a hero and thought that Japan needed someone strong enough to be a pillar of peace and justice. I took a deep breath and maintained eye contact. You left an impression on your late master, Nana Shimura, and she gave you one for all. Do I need to go on? All Might frowned. This is not at all what I had in mind when you said you wanted a meeting. Was All Might pouting? So, if I'm understanding this correctly. Nezu looked up towards All Might and gave him a speculative glance. You possess a quirk that can be passed down from one person to another? Yes, that's the gist of it. I can explain more later, but why don't you continue? I'm sorry, what exactly should we call you? Enjimbra. Just, call me Enji. It was close enough to my real name anyways, if I played with the letters a bit. And the sounds. Okay, so it had two similar letters but that was close enough. It'll make things easier. Or Endeavor, it is who I am now, kinda. Well then Enji, it appears as though you've gotten All Might to believe you. Nezu took a long sip of his tea, finishing the drink with a content sigh. And while that would be enough for me normally, I'm still a bit suspicious. You're claiming to have knowledge from 20 years in the future in the form of a manga you read. It seems a bit convenient, so what are your goals? Long term? I don't really know. I shrugged, showing both of my hands as I leaned forward onto my knees. For my personal goals, it's to make sure that the family I found myself in is happier than the one I know. But, beyond that, I don't know. That's why I came here. Not only are you two of the smartest people I know, but you're also both firmly on the side of good. And if I'm wrong about trusting you, then I'm wrong about a lot of things. So, if you want to know what my goal for coming here is, it's to get your help. I'm not asking anything for what I know. I'm not even sure what I know will even be of any help right now. Most of it is in 20 years from now, and things are already going to be different. I looked at my hand and stared at it for a moment. I'm not Endeavor, I'm not a hero. I don't know if I could save the people he saved. I can barely go 5 minutes without setting myself on fire. So, that's my goal. My goal is to trust you too. I looked at both of them and gave my best smile, so please, help me. All Might's grin stretched from ear to ear. Fear not, Enji. We can team up for a while and I can get you into heroic shape in no time flat. This will be great. The two of us teaming up, can you imagine all the good we'll do? When I looked at Nezu, I made certain that I looked like the most pitiable person on the planet in hopes that he would save me. Part of me, a large part of me, just didn't want to be a hero. That wasn't who I was as a person. I panicked, and the idea of me being responsible for someone's life or death made me lightheaded. Perhaps. Nezu gave a sadistic smile. Right, he was sadistic. But for now, Enji, please, tell us all you know. This felt a lot like high school. A red rubber ball slammed into my face with enough force to put my face onto the ground and my ass up in the air. I glanced across the court towards All Might as he winced at the result of his throw. That was apparently him going easy on me. But, I should have known better, he was still probably frustrated over everything. Being told by both myself and Nezu that we would have to wait. I knew that Tenko was born this year, but I didn't know exactly when, never paid much attention to stuff like villains' birthdays. Hell, the only reason why I knew his age was because I was surprised he was actually kind of young. Still, we had 5 years to intervene. All Might just wanted to work on a faster time scale. Which was fair. I'm not exactly patient either. All Might gasped, running over to me, his shoes squeaking against the gym floor that had been lent to us for a brief period of assessment. The principal who was grooming Nezu to be his successor had been more than amiable and even made sure to keep it a secret that the number 1 and number 2 pro heroes were playing dodgeball. Sorry Enji, I thought you could handle that. I accepted his hand as I stood. The room was ever so slightly still spinning as my head reeled from what felt like a rubber train hitting me in the face. I placed my hand on his chest and smiled, mostly to steady myself. Don't worry about it, I don't think you gave me a concussion. All Might grabbed my hand and lifted my arm up, his dark blue eyes burning into my soul as he inspected me closer. The frustration was written all over his face. You weren't kidding when you said you didn't have any instincts. He wasn't really wrong. Really the only instinct I actually had was flailing my hand in front of my face when I heard an insect. I've never even been in a fight before. I looked at my hand. How many times had I dreamed of having magical abilities? How many times did I cast Fireball as a wizard in D&D? Countless. With a deep breath I reached into Enji's deepest memories, finding that first moment. For him, it had come naturally, from the moment his quirk awakened the flames were under his control. I did not have that luxury. I focused on my hand, picturing a flame on it. My hand ignited into a bonfire that nearly singed All Might's eyebrows off. I said it before, I'm not a fighter, I'm not a hero. I'm just some guy, in a rough spot, that wants to do the right thing. But, that doesn't mean I don't want to learn my quirk. So please, All Might. Have some patience with me. All Might gave a fierce smile and placed his hand on my shoulder before moving his other hand to put out another fire in my hair. Why was I constantly on fire? Ha! Well said, Enji, well said. Though to be honest, I have no real advice on how to learn how to use a quirk, it just came naturally to me. Right, he sucked ass at that, didn't he? That's fine, I normally like to figure stuff out like this on my own. Mostly due to stubbornness. But even then, I still have a lot to learn and not much time to learn it. All Might crossed his arms and tapped on his chin. I understand your goal well enough, but I have to be honest, I'm confused about what role you want to play. You say you're not a hero, but you also want to do the right thing. That's nothing new, most people struggle to find their own place in life. I stretched, looking at him in the eye. Even though I was so much taller as Enji than I had been, All Might still made me feel small. Weren't you the same?
Nope, I've always known exactly what I wanted to be. All Might struck a pose and beamed with energy. A pillar of peace and justice.
But, before that, he blinked in surprise, his pose deflating. I don't mean this in a bad way, All Might, but, you know this struggle as much as anyone. And you'll know it again, once you pass it on. I scratched the back of my head. What the hell was I doing lecturing All Might? I mean, when you were in middle school, did you not struggle because your dreams were far larger than your own capabilities? Didn't you ever feel lost because of that? And you only found your path because of Nana? All Might let out a sigh that nearly sounded like a growl. You're far wiser than Endeavor ever was. Not really, I just study storytelling and know how character arcs are supposed to work, at least in theory. Right then. Enji, I've made up my mind, if it's fighting you need to learn, there's only one man we can turn to. All Might shook a bit nervously. You know him, right? The one who taught me how to fight? I was never good at dealing with angry old people. Gran Torino, right? Sorihiko? I asked, already knowing the answer. That's right. I can give you his contact information and his address. He's currently living out in the countryside, so you might even be able to. I walked forward and placed a hand on All Might's shoulder. All Might, one of my goals is to make sure that you know how to actually teach a bit. So, you're coming with me. All Might paled, and looked completely unlike the great hero he was at this time. I saw the first hints of his struggling character I was familiar with. But why'd I have to go? There's no need for it, so. Nope, while I'm learning how to fight, you'll be learning how to teach. But he'll be even more annoyed by that. All Might, the #1 pro hero and a man that could punch with the force of a nuke, was whining. Part of me took a great deal of pride in that. It was amazing what you could do when you understood a character's background, motivations, and fears. You're going to have to talk to him eventually, don't you want to talk to him about Nana's kid? All Might let out a long huff and his shoulders deflated. I'm going to have to get used to you being right, aren't I? You and me both. Alright then, we'll head for his cabin tonight. Tonight? Better late than never. If I called him to tell him we were coming, he'd be annoyed that we weren't already there. For one of the fastest men alive, that made a lot of sense. Also, better late than never. Wait, was he referring to how he was too afraid to even call Gran Torino? I'll let it slide, but just why? Wait, wouldn't he be more annoyed if we did show up unannounced? Once again All Might deflated. Good point. Right, well, you call him, I need to make a phone call. Though, given the current situation, she might not even answer, or even be bothered that I wasn't coming home tonight. So many memories of Endeavor staying late hours and never contacting Ray for anything. She really was just an object to him. Call? Who? Ray, my wife. Tuya and Fuyumi as well. I scratched my neck. Training to become a hero might delay the whole being a good father plan I had going. But, I'd make up for it. You sure do care for them, even if they aren't really your kids. That's admirable. I shrugged. Not really, I'm just. All Might's hand fell on my shoulder again and he gave me a rough shake. Enji, learn to take a compliment. 4x reeing. Hello? Ray's soft-spoken voice was less than a whisper over the phone, especially after I spent so much time talking with All Might recently. It was actually nice, I generally preferred the quiet. Enji? Her voice had a bit of shake to it. Maybe a few extra days away from each other would help her calm down? Hey Ray, I said in my own hushed tone. I caught a glimpse of myself in the locker room mirror. The UA gym suit that I had been lent was snug, but fit well. How are things with your mother? Huh? I could hear Ray shifted. She's well. A pause. It's not like I could expect much more, that would be my response as well. And the kids? Another pause. I could feel her discomfort through the phone. Maybe I was trying too much? My lack of relationship experience was probably hurting me here, but it was easy to tell that Ray didn't want this phone call. My dad is playing badminton with Tuya, and Fuyumi is just about to take a nap. I see. Well, I guess I'll have to talk to them later. Thought it might have been a good idea to at least let them know what I was doing. Better to hear it from me than their mother. Or maybe not. At least that's what I would have preferred. But, I'm just calling to let you know that I'll be out of town for a while. Oh, I see. Ray's voice was soft. Yeah, it's just going to be a training trip with All Might. Was that too much? Ray didn't seem like the gossip type, especially not about me. So, the house will be pretty empty for a while, but, when I get back, why don't we all go out to eat? Sure. She sounded confused. Great, I'd hate to leave it to you, but can you help me pick a restaurant that the kids might like as well? We can invite your parents as well. I heard her gasp through the phone. Are you suggesting a family dinner? Nothing that formal really, just, well, yeah, together, as a family, one where you don't have to cook. Sure, I'll talk to my parents about it. Great. I scratched the back of my head and frowned at the lack of a timetable I had for current events. Few things annoyed me more than not being able to give a set date. I don't know when we'll be back, but I'll try to let you know ahead of time. Oh, and Ray. Tonight, when you're reading Fuyumi her story, why not have Tuya read it with you? I do it, but I won't be home. Memories of reading the stories to my little sister stuck out the most from when I was Tuya's age. Oh, sure. Ray paused again. Enji? Yeah? What? No, never mind. Alright, she probably wanted to know what happened to me. There was a time and place for that. And over the phone, wasn't it? I needed to tell her sooner rather than later. Take care, Ray.
Thank you, Enji. The phone went silent and I stared at it for a few moments. The kids, I wouldn't need to tell, they probably wouldn't understand anyways. Well, Tuya might. My first night of being a father and a husband, and I was already going fishing for the weekend. Still, I didn't have much of a choice. I was a hero, not even by choice. Kind of shows how boring adults were. Now that I was a hero, I was dreading the idea of it. What was that about character arcs earlier? Fuck. I stood and walked back out towards the gym. Time to get my ass kicked by All Might at dodgeball, before we set out for Gran Torino's cabin. When we exited the gym, I saw a student looking at me. Abnormally tall, plain-looking, lanky, with sharp glasses and green hair marked with yellow. It was Sir Night-Eye, but younger. He was wearing a school uniform as well. Mirai? Which one was it? I was about to wave to him, but he darted away. What were the chances that he was such a massive All Might fanboy that he was too shy to come say hello? 4XI learned several important lessons on my way to Gran Torino's cabin. The first of which was that All Might couldn't drive. The quick-to-follow second lesson was that in Japan, they drive on the left side of the road. The third was once again All Might related, as he wasn't exactly the best at directions. It was already dark, and we had gotten lost twice. Alright, I'm positive this is it. All Might pointed towards the small dirt road that was going up into the mountains. I would say that if he was wrong this time, he'd be carrying the car back down the mountain, but he already did that. It was terrifying, if you're sure. We took my somewhat nice car up the road and gave a light twitch when I heard the gravel hit the undercarriage. A brief flicker of light alerted me that I was on fire again, and once again All Might put it out. Thanks. My pleasure. Sorry for getting lost. All Might relaxed in the back seat of the car. Largely because we discovered quickly that between the two of us, it was cramped in the front and that I wouldn't be able to see out of my left window with him scrunched in there. Apparently, he didn't have the ability to freely switch between forms. Say, Enji, why don't you tell me a bit more about yourself? Like, what? I kept my eyes on the winding gravel-covered road that was partially reclaimed by nature. It was one of those roads that looked like it had been carved by a car, with a ridge of grass in the center and two ruts filled in by gravel. It made me feel like I was trying to drive on two very narrow roads. Well, you're vastly different from Endeavor, so why don't we start with your occupation? Oh joy. Sharing. Well, it wasn't like I had my old life to be private about anyways. Besides, I really wanted All Might to trust me. Well, I actually had several jobs. I suppose two were actually important. I actually worked in IT, air, with computers, like what they do at I Island, just more boring and completely different. Come to think of it, all that information is probably going to be completely useless in this world. It was very likely that the languages I was used to operating on were completely outdated. That, and there was a good chance that this world was filled with anime bullshit computer science. But before that I was a teacher. Ooh? All Might sat forward a bit, smiling. A teacher? What subject? Math. It was only for a year, but I was a bit too young to handle a job like that. I laughed as I remembered that hellish year. Generally speaking, I tended to not stay with a job that gave me a black eye. So why the hell was I going to be a hero again?
The good news was that math was math. It was really hard to change how math worked. So at least I had that. But, what I really wanted to be was an author. Oh, were you ever successful? The remainder of the trip was spent telling All Might about myself, and when it came to an end, at a lone cabin in the middle of the woods near a lake, I swear I could hear All Might shit himself as I saw a very annoyed, and much taller Gran Torino standing there glaring at us. Get out of that car. He stomped his foot and glared at us. You two would have been here quicker if you had ran here, so now we're going to run around the lake, get going. My first shower in this world was far more humiliating, degrading, and frustrating than anything I had ever experienced. Cold, silty mud swallowed my hands nearly to my wrist, and my toes were so deep into the mud that I could feel myself taking root. Beneath my stomach was a pile of pointy rocks. He would have used hot coals, but those wouldn't work on me. Above was a hose, pouring down a lot of fresh lake water down onto my back. It felt slimy.
My goal was to keep a fire lit on my back strong enough to not be put out by the water but also not so hot that it would burn the really thin string preventing my face from being turned into a skillet by that looming egg.
This was technically torture, and I have no idea why I agreed to it in the first place. This had to be some anime bullshit trope. Only in this case, the training made sense. Relearning how to control Endeavor's quirk was more than needed, especially with how strong he had trained it. Oftentimes it felt like my quirk was a large dog that did what it wanted. Only instead of the main danger being the fridge raided, it was burning down the countryside.
Control was needed. You're an asshole. Sorahiriko stomped down in front of me. His casual flip-flops, relaxed shorts, and Hawaiian print shirt was his way of saying, fuck you fucks, this was my vacation. He pointed back towards where All Might was. The large man was currently resting his head against a nearby tree. What the hell makes you think I can teach that numbskull how to think?
I let out a dry laugh and smiled. I just wanted him to suffer alongside me.
Prick. The man kneeled down and looked at me with a wry smile on his face. But I guess I can't really be too mad at you, considering all you managed to tell us so far. But, is there nothing in there of the old Endeavor? That boy could do work. Memories mostly. Basic things like the language were really convenient, knowledge of how to get around Tokyo was also good. But it's not like I've actually done those things. So, here I am, asking some grumpy old man to train me.
Sorahiriko gave a sharp laugh and poked me in the side with a stick. You're a bit weird. From what All Might told me, you don't exactly want to be a hero. I don't? Then why go through this? Being a hero isn't easy, it's something you have to put your heart and soul into. At least it was back in my day. Now it feels like people all want to be heroes for the wrong reasons. A life saved is a statistic now. It's my job. That was the only reply I could get out with short breath as I focused again on the flame. Though, maybe it's more than that. I wasn't put into the shoes of the hero second to All Might to say it's too hard and give up. Though the thought has been on my mind ever since All Might first hit me with a dodgeball, and even before then. It really felt like everything was just happening way too fast. I hadn't really had time to consider what I wanted to do. I hadn't even slept in my own bed, let alone actually take the time and do things that just felt more important. Like making Rei not afraid of me. Also raising the kids I now had. Did Fuyumi know how to read yet? She seemed like she'd be a smart girl. Then again, she only said like 2 words at a time to me. I needed to buy a parenting book. HMPH, doing it because you have to. I can respect that. How many people was I going to end up having this conversation with? Well, with Sorahiriko he was the last one I was planning on telling about who I was, except for Rei, but that wasn't for a while. So one last time. I wonder if she would tell me that I'm a hero too. I hadn't even done anything heroic yet. Well then, I have no idea how I'm going to train your quirk. I had a feeling that would be the case. And your body's already in shape too, so the only thing left for me is to get you to fight. Sorahiriko gave a short sharp whistle and glanced back towards All Might. Toshi. Get your numbskull over here. You're going to spar with Enji until he can put up a fight. I could have stayed in Tokyo if I wanted to do that. Sorahiriko poked my side and gave a sly grin. This is for all the trouble, you little bastard. Before I could speak, the string was cut and the egg slammed into my face. 4x every single part of my body hurt. A lot. For 4 days I had been tossed, punched, kicked, and generally yeeted into the nearly freezing lake, each one accompanied by an apology from the 7-foot-tall man that was currently sleeping on a couch a few feet away from me. Gran Torino's cabin wasn't built for a family. It had a bedroom and that was about it. The shower was pretty much on the outside. Hey, Enji. All Might's voice lacked its usual boom and it was instead something more down-to-earth, human-sounding. Like all the bolster he had all this week had left him. Are you still awake? Were we 12-year-olds have a sleepover now? Though, I suppose after a few days of getting my ass kicked by him, All Might was close enough to a friend. It just felt so hilarious that All Might was an overgrown adult still acting like a child at times. But then again, I didn't even know what being an adult meant. Yeah, I groaned, looking over to see All Might reclined on the couch, his massive arms supporting his head as he stared up at the ceiling. Something bothering you? All Might gave a mighty sigh that caused his entire chest to rise and fall. How do you make an impossible choice? I'm torn between a single family and the greater good. I know what I want, but I don't know if I can be selfish with this. I let out my own sigh, a tuft of flame escaping my lips and illuminating the room. You're talking about the Shimuras and All for One, right? Silence. Contemplation. The cold side of the pillow.
Yeah, I want to save them. All Might's voice cracked for just a moment. But, is it right for me to save them? You're talking about what Nezu said, right? I closed my eyes. The callousness of that option, that plan, it didn't sit well with me at the time, but I could understand why. If I had talked only to Nezu, we probably would have gone with that plan from the start. It was by all accounts, the safest plan. But, the least humane. Nezu was pragmatic. He believed in the greater good and had grand plans on how to achieve just that. He believed in sacrifices. All Might wanted to save everyone. I folded my arms and let out a breath when All Might didn't say anything. I know why you're conflicted. On the one hand, you have a chance to save 5 people right now. Plus the countless others that Shigi would have killed if he wasn't saved. But, on the other, you have a chance to get at One for All. All for One. Sorry, the names are really close and I'm going to get those confused a lot. I blame Tom and Jerry with the Mouseketeer episodes for teaching me One for All and All for One, or however that actual saying went. But you get what I'm saying.
All Might grunted. He was the one that wanted to talk. I sighed and rolled my shoulders. I wanted to sleep on a bed. Wait. My bed was a mat on the floor. I should buy a real bed. A big one. And one pillow. A really good pillow. If you're asking me to make that choice for you, it's not something I can really do. In theory, stopping One for All for One is more important than a single life. But, by just saving one life, you can save countless lives. I let out a sigh and rolled off the ground and headed for the kitchen. But, we might not be able to save them. It's not something you can really punch to solve. I know, but, just trying, that might change something, right? All Might sat up from the couch, his blue eyes fluctuating in the darkness of the room. If I can be there for them, to remove some of that hatred of heroes, to embrace them, then maybe, that will work. I grabbed a water bottle and tossed one to All Might before making my way back to my spot on the ground. Maybe, but, the problem is his quirk, right? All Might stared at the water bottle for a moment before he opened it and all but crushed it into his mouth. A quirk that can only destroy. For a child that might want to become a hero, a quirk like that would do nothing but harm. It's tragic. If we find them quickly, who knows what could happen? I shrugged, sitting down and glancing towards my water bottle. There's a lot we don't know about quirks, and while Endeavor studied a lot, it's not an exact science. You can't judge a child's quirk until it manifests. There's a chance, however small, that Tamura's quirk will change. I gave All Might my best smile and nodded at him, and even if it doesn't, I know that you'll be able to help him. I blinked and took a drink from my water bottle. Just, do me a favor and promise me you won't give him One for All. I'd hate to picture what a quirk like that would do supercharge. All Might gave a dry chuckle. Don't worry, I'll be holding on to One for All for a good long time. I admit I'm curious about this Izuku you mentioned. When the time comes, I hope I'll still be able to confide in you. I'll do my best to be there when you need me. How strange it felt being the main character in a story for once. Hey, Toshi? Think you can do me a favor? 4X being excited to return home was nothing new to me. I was a homebody at heart, and even if this was a new home for me, it was still home. It was still a place where I could relax. It felt new, exciting, and I all but sprinted into the front door. I opened it and stood there for a moment just basking in the sensation of finally being home. I felt so at peace. Rei, I called in a loud soft voice. Fuyumi? I'm home. Fuyumi came running around the corner doing that odd toddler waddle. Her balance was off and it looked like she might fall over, but she made it around the corner like a pro. She paused right in front of me with wide eyes and a frazzled look. Pancake. I couldn't help but laugh as I bent down to scoop her up. Apparently, she was instantly addicted to pancakes. That was good. I had a weapon now, but probably shouldn't feed her too many of them. That's for breakfast, Fuyumi, and only when you're really good, okay? MMK. She nodded and stopped struggling for a bit. Rei and Tuya came walking around the corner next. Tuya looked happy, which was good, but Rei looked concerned. She stood nervously and shifted slightly. I thought you were going to call. Sorry Ray, really, I should have but, I wanted to surprise you guys with something. She looked more confused and worried now. A surprise? Fuyumi flopped in my arms as she saw the surprise coming first. All Might. She cheers, extending her arms out towards him.
Hello, little one. All Might grabbed her from my arms and hoisted her up to his shoulders. His 7-foot-high shoulders. It should be fine. It was All Might. Kids were bouncy. It was fine. Totally fine. He walked into the house and smiled widely. Never fear, for I am here. For some tea, and I heard that I had some fans.
Tuya's mouth dropped and he looked at All Might, then he looked at me. I nodded. He hugged All Might's kneecap with maximum force. All Might smiled towards Ray and nodded. Sorry for dropping by unannounced. Enji said that he wanted to surprise you. Oh, it's, Ray blinked several times and placed a hand on her forehead. It's fine, please, come on in All Might, she looked at me. I smiled at her, hands on my hips and doing the best I could to look as unscary as possible. You're my husband's guest, so you're more than welcome. She gave a short bow and turned to leave. I'll go get the tea ready. Oh, I'll help. I followed Ray into the kitchen, wordlessly helping her get the tea ready. Partway through the process, she paused. Her gray eyes met mine directly for more than a second, perhaps for the first time. Enji? Did something happen to you? I smiled and nodded at her. I'm fine Ray. I paused. Part of me wanted to tell her the truth now. Another part of me didn't want to. I didn't know why she deserved to know the truth, didn't she? It could be a good way to let her know that her nightmare was, in a way, over. I want to be a good father. Oh. She stopped moving, her face perplexed, and she let her shoulders slump. I see. I also want to be honest with you. So please, give me some time to gather my thoughts, and don't worry, I won't force you to do anything against your will. She blinked, and for the first time smiled at me. It was small, barely there, a whisper of amusement. Does that mean we can skip dinner with my parents? I gave her my biggest smile and shrugged. I'd still like to meet them, but we can do that when you're ready. Ray nodded and we continued to make the tea, boiling it with my quirk, and Ray's quirk to quickly cool the tea as we made a pretty good team in the kitchen. Starting a new job is always stressful. Normally I have hundreds of questions I want to ask but am too afraid to ask as I constantly worry about messing up. It's part of the reason why I avoided jobs where someone's life could be in my hands. It was borderline phobia. And being a hero was combining all the worst aspects of that. What if I was late? What if I misread the situation and made things worse? I hesitated putting my shoes on. How was I supposed to even fight? I barely even managed to get a hit on All Might during a crash course of fight training that was really just me swimming in cold water and trying not to burn down the entire mountain because holy crap was that easy with my quirk. At least when I used it I didn't break my bones or anything. Was it wrong to make fun of someone that wasn't even born yet? I'm going to go with no, purely so I don't feel like an awesome person in the future. Besides, he might not even be born. Endeavor could have easily saved Inko and Hiashi's life at some point and there was no guarantee that I was going to be there to make that happen. There were dozens upon dozens of ways that Izuku might not even be born. Though, at the same time, he might just end up being vital to this universe and all but inevitable. Maybe I should have talked to Night Eye when I saw him at UA but then again, it didn't really matter. Not right now at least. Right now, I needed to focus on my job. Being a hero, which meant walking around and fighting crime when I saw villains using their quirk or rescue when possible. At least I remembered most of the laws and rules for being a hero. Still, I shouldn't be too worried. Why so glum, Endeavor? All Might gave me a slap on my back, sending a fit of embers up despite there being very little fire on my costume. Both of us were dressed in full hero regalia. All Might was in his alternative hero costumes. Izuku called them ages or something, I really don't remember. Let's go with Silver Age. All Might leaned down and smiled at me. You know you gotta smile when you save people. That could be a problem. I gave a crooked smile to All Might and shrugged. He let out a laugh and patted my shoulder. That's the spirit. Now then. Let's get this patrol along the way. People are starting to stare. People already were staring. From the very moment we walked out of the agency all eyes had been on us. It was impossible not to hear the whispers. People were wondering why the number 2 and number 1 pro hero were walking down the street so casually. Some were even worried that something big could be going down. It was hard to blame them. Still, I hoped that this was just going to be a nice peaceful stroll. It took all of 20 minutes for that dream to be shattered. A car crash got both of our attention and All Might took off in a dizzying sprint that I couldn't hope to match, but still, I found myself running towards the sound of the accident, cutting through an alleyway, between two large buildings and emerging onto the busy street, where I saw what had happened. It wasn't just a car crash. By the time I had got there All Might already had a large wolf-headed man wrapped in a bent street pole. Basically, he looked like a giant werewolf in biker clothes. Several cars had been toppled over and some were nearly totaled. I stared at the scene for a moment. What was I supposed to do? What was I? Help them. Right. I ran towards the nearest car. It was upside down. There was a woman stuck inside, blood on her forehead. The door was stuck shut by the damage to the car, and wouldn't budge when I pulled on it. My quirk. Localize the heat towards the damage. With a jet of flame coming out of my knee, I weakened the joints and metal inside just enough for me to pull off the door and get the woman out quickly. I pulled her out as quickly as I could and checked her head. My first aid knowledge was limited, but in general, passed out, and bleeding from the head was a bad sign. Looking into the car, I saw the driver, a man, currently struggling to get out of his seatbelt. He had curly black hair and was breathing fire to cut his seatbelt. I looked at the woman. Green hair. Inko. The man gasped as he fell down onto the ceiling of the car. Is Inko all right? You have got to be shitting me. She's breathing, I replied and extended a hand towards the man and pulled him out of the car with far more ease than I thought I would. I looked at the man and noticed his arm was bleeding a lot. What about you? Are you all right? I'm fine. He moved his arm and grimaced slightly, just a little cut up. All right. I moved Inko to the side and gestured towards her. Watch her until the paramedics arrive. Thank you. So much endeavor. I nodded and moved to the next vehicle. There were a total of 4 that had been caught up in the accident, and Inko was by far the worst case, with everyone else being in various stages of disgruntled, shocked, and done with this shit. It took the paramedics only 5 minutes to show up, which for a busy city like Tokyo was probably pretty good. Inko was stabilized on the spot and then taken to the hospital for a more thorough check. Everyone else was given a clean bill of health. It was all a bit strange. The way the werewolf looked wasn't ferocious, or vengeful. If anything, he just looked downtrodden. I walked past the officers as they loaded him up into the police truck and managed to meet his eyes. Hey, what happened? I asked in a low voice that wasn't quite a whisper. The werewolf blinked at me and in a low growly voice pointed towards his leg. There was blood on it. It was an accident. I got hit and it set my quirk off. That didn't feel right. It really didn't, being arrested for an accident, but that was the law in this world. If you need me as a witness, call. I reached into my pocket and pulled out one of a dozen cards Endeavor had made for various reasons. Mostly lawsuits. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. His tail started wagging, slapping an officer in the face a few times before he was shoved into the van. All Might stood near me as we watched the transport take off and the tow trucks appeared to move. Not bad for our first team up. He nudged me slightly and nodded towards the road, but we should get going before the reporters show up. Hey, All Might, what did you see when you showed up? I asked, looking up towards the man. An unquestionable sense of justice, the willingness to always do the right thing, and the strength to do it. Those were the qualities that made up All Might. Or, they should have been. I mean, what was that man doing? The villain? Well, he was growling and flipped a car over. His eyes were red too, though he didn't put up much of a fight. Why? I shrugged. I'm not sure because I was too slow, but I think all of this was an accident, and that man doesn't deserve jail time. All Might's hand tightened on my shoulder. I understand why you're concerned, but that's what the investigators are for. I just hummed and followed All Might on our patrol once again. It still didn't sit right with me. Hopefully, the police and investigators were good at their jobs and could figure out what happened. Hopefully, the rest of the day would be uneventful. It wasn't. I found myself just chasing after All Might as he would ditch me, and already have everything done with by the time I showed up. Which was actually pretty alright. I didn't have to use my quirk to fight, mostly I just helped people. But man, were people just addicted to crime and accidents in this world or something? Or maybe this was standard and I'm just used to living in a sleepy little town in the middle of nowhere. Oh, man. All Might slapped his forehead and smiled down at me. My bad, Enji, I've been hogging all the action today, haven't I? Sorry. I was so excited to be doing a team up with you that I got a little ahead of myself. Oh, don't worry, it's nonsense. Why don't I let you handle the... As if on cue, because of course, it is. A scream of terror followed by shattered glass resounded from down the alleyway. This one is all yours. All Might nudged me forward. Don't worry, I'll keep an eye out if you need any backup. Before I could protest, All Might jumped away, and I ended up finding my legs heading towards the screaming anyways. Once again, it was another scene that at first looked bad. A large, taller than All Might man that had the armor of one of those black beetles, actually beside the human face, he looked like a Heracross from Pokemon, was standing amongst the wreckage of a restaurant front, his large wings buzzing as he looked rather furious. Hey, I waved to him and walked over to the scene. Everyone looked at me with a sort of respect that felt a bit out of place. Then again, it could just be fire safety. Or gun safety. Both. So. Endeavor. The beetle shrieked, his large wings vibrating. Back away, or I'll. Look, I'm not here to fight. I raised a hand and put on my best smile, but if you run, I might have to do that. And I know what happens when you heat up a beetle. Not really, but I assumed it wasn't pretty. Oh. The beetle man tucked in his wings and pointed to the store. I placed an order and the miniature beetle-like limbs on their torso twitched and fidgeted. With the app, and when I came to pick it up they refused to serve me, because of my appearance. An employee stuck his head out from inside the restaurant. He was a younger guy, with thick pink hair. If that was a Hatsume I was going to punch something. How many people lived in Tokyo? A lot. That's how many, far too many for me to keep running into the parents of all the characters I know. Besides, Mei was from not Tokyo, she was from Kyoto. In theory. The fake Hatsume jumped a bit and pointed towards the beetle. The girl that was taking the order has arachnophobia and started screaming. But he's a beetle. The employee shrugged. I let out a sigh and looked up to the beetle. I can understand being upset about being refused service. I'm not allowed to go into fireworks stores. But, I gestured towards the ground and all the damage he caused. That still doesn't mean I can wreck the place. I know, the beetle continued to twitch their hands. It's just I'm so hungry and I just wanted to get my food and I'm tired of people screaming at me, and I lost my cool for a bit. I'm not a villain, I swear. I believe you, honestly I did. Really I don't think that half the people labeled villains actually meant any harm, but I haven't seen all that much of it. But, still, when you're your size, you need to be more careful and be more patient with others. I know, they whined, and looked at me with a pout. It wasn't cute. What happens now? I scratched my head and shrugged. You might end up spending the night in jail. Or we could just file an accident report with the police. I can stay and talk with them once they show up if you'd like. They nodded eagerly. I looked up at the skyline and saw All Might giving me a thumbs up. How the hell did he hear that conversation from all the way up there? He jumped away, no doubt continuing his patrol solo. Or he was going home. We had been doing this for nearly half the day already. I rolled my neck and looked at the shop inside. Well, it wasn't Mexican, but it did smell good. But damn, could I go for a burrito right now? I pulled out my phone and dialed. Ray picked up on the third ring. Engie. Her voice was soft. Hey, Ray, it's going to be a bit before I head home. Have you started cooking? No, not yet. Good, do you want to? 'Cause I'm standing right next to a takeout place if you'd like. A pause. Sure. That'd be fine. 4XA's scream woke me up in the middle of the night. My heart pounded in my ears and I was towards the door before I even registered getting out of the bed. That scream. It was Fuyumi. I crashed into the wall, my feet barely gripping the smooth wooden floor as I made my way to her room. I found her sitting up on her bed, crying and screaming. Hey, I said gently, scooping down to pick her up and holding her to my shoulder. It's okay. Daddy's gotcha. You're okay now, you're okay. I bounced her a few times and moved to turn on the light. It's okay Fuyumi, it was just a bad dream. You'll be okay. No. Fuyumi grabbed on tight and pressed her head into my neck. She was crying. What was I supposed to do? I had no experience with crying, little girls. Which was probably a good thing. But what did my little sister do when they had a nightmare? Sleep in front of my door? I don't think that would work here. You'll be okay, I repeated, still patting her back. Do you want me to look under your bed? No, what's wrong then? Fuyumi just let out a few more sobs and continued to cry. I couldn't help her if I didn't know what scared her. I let out a sigh and tried not to let my own tiredness get in the way of helping Fuyumi. What was I supposed to do? I should read some good parenting books, or something. Engie. I turned and saw Ray standing in the entrance. Her hand was gripping the wall slightly, and I could see bits of frost forming where her hand touched. Anger. Fear. Distrust. What happened here? Mama. Fuyumi pulled herself from my shoulder and extended her arms towards Ray. I gave her to Ray without a second thought. She had a bad dream. I ran here as soon as I heard. Yeah, Ray said calmly, bouncing Fuyumi on her hip with ease. Thanks. Thanks for that. Ray kissed the top of Fuyumi's head and smiled. It's okay, Fuyumi. Mommy's here. Do you want to sleep in my bed? Fuyumi nodded and held onto her tight. I sighed. That made sense. Hey Ray, I asked in my own soft voice. How do I become a good father? She stopped in her tracks and looked at me. Looked right at me for a long time. I don't know, she admitted after a moment. But, I think you're on your way. Good night Engie. Good night Ray. Night night Fuyumi, night night Papa. That night, I dreamed of tacos. For so many reasons that I couldn't even begin to explain. There were people. A lot of people. Then there were the villains. Some of them were just having a bad day, some were just punks, others were quirk rights advocates, and some were just assholes that wanted me dead. Oddly enough, my time on the internet had actually prepared me for most of them. The only exception was the black eye. Never got one of those from the internet. I really shouldn't have let my guard down quite like that, but I suppose I'm lucky that I wasn't killed. Then again, I could have plot armor or something. But that wasn't an idea I was going to test or live by. This wasn't some video game, there weren't any save points, and there were people that relied on me. Dad, Tuya came running into my bathroom and slammed into my leg with the force of a kid excited for their first real Christmas. The red-haired boy smiled up at me and pulled on my shirt and towards the way he came. You're on TV. Fuck. I smiled and rubbed his head. All right, lead the way. I followed Tuya to the living room. Rei was sitting there, a bit of knitting resting on her lap while Fuyumi was currently face down on the floor, which I just assumed was a toddler thing to do because Rei wasn't paying it any mind. See. Watch. Tuya climbed over the couch and bounced down into a seat next to his mother. I placed my hand on the back of the couch and watched. It was something that felt like it belonged in a funny YouTube video. My body was sent flying, bouncing off of 2 cars before I landed on the street and stood up. The cameraman moved closer and got a good shot of my face. Watching it from a different point of view made it look worse than it actually was. At the time I didn't even feel the impact of the cars, but my new bruises certainly felt it. I stood. A torrent of fire shot out from my nose and my body ignited for a moment. I just want to fucking talk. Rei shot me a look. It wasn't dirty, it was more, just a look reminding me to not swear in front of the kids.
Sorry, I didn't know that they wouldn't censor it, I muttered, glancing back towards the TV.
Oh, she said softly. I suppose that's fair. She shifted in her seat to look me over better. You're not too hurt, are you? She was worried about me. I smiled and nodded. A bit sore, but a bit of rest and I'll be fine. The news earned our attention again, with the newscaster now appearing. That was just another in a string of incidents involving the pro-hero Endeavor, who has quickly risen to the number 2 position. However, previously, he had been known to be rather ruthless. It's currently unknown what caused this recent change, but many believe that All Might may have had a hand in reforming the grumpiest hero. But the question remains, will Endeavor maintain his top ranking as a hero that looks most like a villain? I hope not, I muttered, staring at the TV as I rolled my shoulder. That's an image I'd rather not maintain. Why? Tuya spun up and around, jumping onto the couch to get right into my face. Don't you like being a super strong badass? Tuya. Sorry, Mom. But don't you like being super strong, Dad? I thought you wanted to be stronger than All Might? Tuya's blue eyes focused on me with an intense flame. I shrugged and patted him on the head. Being a hero is more than just beating people up, Tuya. It's about saving people, and most of the time, villains need saving just as much as people do. They just need a different kind of saving. Even the guy that punched you. Which one? Yeah, in a way, but I still had to beat him up. Generally, people were rather terrified of being caught on fire, which made actually fighting people. That weren't All Might. Kinda easy. I still didn't like it. Hated it even. Whoa, Dad. Tuya jumped and grabbed onto my arm like a monkey, hanging from his arms and legs and staring at his mom. Isn't that great, Mom? Dad wants to save everyone. Does that include All Might? Haha. Sure thing. I'll even save All Might, Tuya. I chuckled, holding my arm up high, and Tuya slid off of it onto the couch in a huff. It was a good thing children bounced. I think we'll end up taking turns though. After I save him, he's going to have to save me, Yano. Really? Tuya jumped onto the couch again. Does that mean when I become a hero I can save you? Sure. I laughed and hugged Tuya with one arm. I glanced towards Fuyumi, who had made her way up to the couch and was looking up at me with big eyes. What about you, Fuyumi? Do you want to be a hero? Fuyumi shook her head, her hair flopping back and forth as she stared at me. No. Then what do you want to be? She stared and then looked towards her mother and then back to me, a wide smile on her face that lit up the whole room. A wizard? Ooh? I asked, trying not to laugh at the randomness of that confession. I walked around the sofa and moved to pick Fuyumi up, who continued to stare at me unflinchingly. You want to be a wizard? She nodded twice, placing both hands on my shoulders to do so. Yeah. Well, how about tonight? I read you a story about a wizard. How does that sound? Fuyumi's mouth dropped. Her arms were pushing against my shoulder like she was trying to escape from the surprise and joy in her eyes. Really? Sure. I laughed and looked to Rei. We do have a wizard book, right? Rei snapped her mouth shut and blinked. I don't think so. We don't. Tuya crossed his arms and sat next to his mother. Well, I was taking the day off anyway, and it's not like I can just stay in my room and play video games all day. I mean, I could, in theory. But, I did have this family now. I should try to spend it with them. Why don't we all go out for the day? A shopping trip? What do you say? Ray blinked and put down her knitting to stare at me, her pale silver eyes locked onto me. We do need some new clothes for both of them, but you don't have to come, Enji. Was she asking me to stay? What? No. Tuya jumped up and stepped onto the ground to grab his mother's legs. Mom, Dad has to come. That one really took Ray by surprise. She gave a small kind smile and then nodded. All right, go get dressed and we'll head out. 4XA Children's Toy Store was not exactly where I thought it'd end up as Endeavor of all people, but here I was, holding a small handcart while looking through children's books, with Ray, Tuya, and Fuyumi all there with me. There were even a few books about All Might. Dude really was just in every part of people's lives here, but most of them were just the kind of books designed to teach small lessons, like respect, and helping others out. But wizards weren't exactly a popular topic. Well, besides the poop wizard. But I wasn't going to touch that one. Besides, Fuyumi to my knowledge was potty trained. Which was probably good for a 3.5-year-old. I glanced out of the store and saw a bookstore just on the other side of the mall. I'd be able to find something there, right? There was even a movie shop right next to it. I swished my lips and smiled. I snuck badly, on purpose, over to Ray and handed her the basket. Both Tuya and Fuyumi were looking at me in the confused way children did. Ray, keep them busy, I'm going to the super secret wizard area. Super secret. Fuyumi's eyes went wide as she stared at me. Ray snorted and tossed her hair back laughing. She really did have a great laugh. Her chuckle lasted for a few seconds before she nodded and winked at me. Good luck. Well, that was all the motivation I needed. Somehow, the smell of a bookstore was exactly the same as it had always been. It was the kind of nostalgic smell that reminded me of buying packs of magic growing up. I had never been super into reading, which, given how I wanted, and still kind of want to be a writer, was probably a bit ass backward. But I wasn't here for me. I was here for Fuyumi. There had to be something here that she would want. Something that would bridge the gap between a toddler, child, and preteen. It was a tall order, but there had to be something universal like that. Like Pokemon. Was I trying to get my daughter involved in a fandom this early? Maybe. I kind of wanted to find something we could both geek out over, and wizards I could do. Maybe I should write down all the stories I know. Like, Little Witch Academia. Was it wrong to copyright in another universe? Why did that sound like a light novel? After talking to one of the store clerks, I discovered that plan wouldn't be fruitful as much of the media I knew was present in this world. With things like RWBY, and Little Witch Academia being rather popular. Which was fine, I'd probably end up screwing up if I tried to write them. I left the store with several light novels to read with Fuyumi. Next stop, I headed for the movie store and grabbed just a simple movie to watch with them all tonight. Somehow I didn't even get stopped for an autograph on my way back to the kids' store. I couldn't see them through the window, so I snuck in. I wanted to make Ray laugh again. I saw my chance with a pair of sunglasses that were in the shape of All Might's hair. They were oversized, and just completely ridiculous. Was I allowed to just wear them? I'd buy them afterward just in case. I was totally going to wear them the next time I met with All Might as well. I'm back. I found them close to where I left them and took the handbasket from Ray. There were a few more books in there and even a toy or two. Did you guys find anything good? You could say. Ray turned to look at me, her mouth hanging open for a moment. She snorted and covered her mouth. A light giggle coming from her as I did my best to keep a straight face. Papa. Fuyumi pointed at my face. Why are you wearing that? Huh? Oh, these are my new sunglasses? Pretty cool, right? I wiggled the frames at them, smiling like All Might would. Or should I say plus ultra? Ray snorted again and flailed her arm, her giggling growing more and more intense. She grabbed my sleeve, one hand on her stomach as she lightly stomped her foot. Apparently, I had just hit her weak spot. That or she was finally able to relax after being stressed out for so long. Dad, Tuya pulled on my shirt. That's not what plus ultra means. I know. But, better buckle up, kid, because your new dad is going to understand all of your lingo and use it in all the wrong ways just to confuse you. Just because. 4x We ate out that night, at a comfortable restaurant that served lots of soba. We all relaxed with a movie, all of us on the same couch, with Tuya sitting between me and Ray, though both kids used their mom as a cushion. It was a cute scene that deserved to be framed and cherished. But, soon enough, was my time to shine. One of my favorite things in the world was storytelling. It's why I fell in love with writing. And Fuyumi was going to get the best damn storytelling experience this side of canon. Alright Fuyumi, I picked her up and smiled at her. Are you ready for story time before bed? Her eyes went wide and she nodded vigorously. Can you and Mom read it to me? I looked to Ray. She paused for a moment and then nodded. I want to listen too. Tuya jumped. How did little kids have that much energy? Did he even nap today? Both of you reading is going to be awesome? Fine. Ray let out a sigh but smiled as she did, but brushing teeth first. After the nightly dose of dental hygiene, we were all set for some extreme storytelling. It was strange, I felt like I was as excited about this as the children were. Maybe even more so. And I had been practicing the perfect move to wow them all. I stood on my knees, glancing down at Fuyumi, who was completely tucked in and staring at me with her blue eyes eagerly waiting for me and Ray to start reading. Ray was sitting in the chair next to me, the book positioned so we could both read from it, the closeness forcing us to touch just the slightest amount. I was careful, I didn't want her to feel uncomfortable. Besides, I already had the first bit in my head. Tuya sat cross-legged at the edge of Fuyumi's bed, doing all he could to not bounce off of it with how excited he was. Any second now he was going to crash. When are you going to start? In a second. I laughed. Everyone ready? Tuya nodded, Fuyumi nodded, Ray nodded. All right. I held out my hand, conjuring an avatar of flame. It took the form of a little girl. A little witch girl. This is the story about Akko. More avatars joined in the flame on my hand. About her friends. A larger avatar, followed by a quick shrinking as they all formed into a flaming building. About her teachers, and about her school. This story is called Little Wizard Academia. Enji, it's, Ray began. Fuyumi wanted wizards, right? I looked at Fuyumi and she nodded eagerly. Ray blinked, a faint blush on her cheeks as she smiled. Of course, Little Wizard Academia. We read the story. At the start, I was the only one doing voices for the characters, but as the pages turned, Ray got more and more into it and started to voice the characters as well. As it progressed, I made sure to dim the light in the room, slowly lowering it as both Fuyumi and Tuya wandered off to sleep. By the end of the first chapter, both of them had clocked out. I scooped Tuya up in my arms and placed him on my shoulder, intent on carrying him all the way to his bed. Enji. Ray's soft voice was punctuated by Fuyumi's door clicking shut. A moment? Sure, Ray, I said just as soft, one hand still on Tuya's back. What is it? She took a breath with her whole body, shoulders rolling, arms extending and contracting as she steeled herself for whatever it was she wanted to ask me. She kept her eyes closed. Then she stepped forward and met my eyes intently. You're not Enji, are you? I am, I answered honestly. Well, it's who I am now, but I'm not really Endeavor. If that makes any sense. I don't want to mislead you or anything, but that's the best way I have to put it. No, it's fine. She blinked and looked down. She grabbed my free hand and flipped it over. Her hands felt so tiny on mine. To be honest, I think I've known since then that you were change. And I think I know what you mean by not being Endeavor. So, thank you, I think. I haven't really done any. No, Ray shook her head. You're kind, and I'm not afraid of you. That's not something I thought I'd be able to say. Oh, now it was my turn to be flustered. I could feel my cheeks burning. Well, if you'd like to know more, I'd be happy to tell you later. And Enji. Your hair's on fire. Yeah, it does that. She snorted and let out another giggle that made it worse. Holy shit, did I have a crush on Ray? Did I have a crush on my wife? Good night, Enji. She leaned up and I felt a bit of cold on my head as the fire vanished with a sizzle. She walked behind me and gave Tuya a kiss on the cheek. Good night, Tuya. Night, Mommy, Tuya mumbled. Good night, Ray. Why are you going so slow? You're not using the whole speedometer. Road rage was something that I knew full well, but normally it came from other drivers on the road, not from my own passengers. But I supposed it made sense. All Might could jump there. Gran Torino could fucking bounce there, I guess. And Nezu. Well, Nezu could become roadkill. I let out a long sigh, or tried to, but it turned into a growl. I glanced back through the mirror towards All Might, who was dressed in a suit and even wearing a hat like he was trying to act like he wasn't All Might stuffed in a suit. Sorahiriko sat in the front passenger seat, and the overgrown rodent had escaped from Tuya's booster seat and was currently rummaging through my center console. Why was he even here? You're the ones that wanted to show up as inconspicuous as possible. I sneered, really tempted to just slam on the brake and see how durable Nezu actually was. And for some reason I'm the only one that can drive. I can drive. Nezu jumped up, standing between the two seats, and looked at me expectantly. I watched you enough that I figured it out, and I think I can even apply that towards using the whole speedometer. There is a speed limit, you know, I asked, trying to keep my eyes on the road as I navigated the highway around Tokyo. I'm aware, but heroes are exempt from speeding tickets so long as they. You can't even see over the wheel. That's what the boot seat is for. How would you hit the pedals? I can fashion some extenders and. Nezu, I respect your intelligence, but I will never get in the car with you driving. Honestly, Nezu placed a paw on my arm. I respect that, but drive faster. I smacked my lips and gave a long sigh as I took the exit ramp. We were almost there. But I still didn't understand why Nezu insisted on coming. Maybe he just wanted to get outside of UA for a bit. Either way, he didn't need to be here for this. Both All Might and Sorahiriko gave a gruff laugh at my frustration with Nezu, and Nezu himself even laughed as well. By the end of it I was laughing too.
That laughter came to an abrupt end. "We're here," I announced, pulling up in front of the Shimura's house. Truthfully, Nezu had known about the location for quite some time, and had proceeded to observe the location, getting the newlywed couple's schedule and even making sure that they would all be there. They didn't know we were coming. "So this is it." Sorahiriko gave a long drawn-out sigh as he opened the door. "Well, Toshi, let's go see if all this talk about being heroes is worth a damn or if it's just lip service." All Might nodded and stepped out the door. The pair walked towards the door looking like a father and son heading in for a family dinner after a funeral. Their every movement was choked by sadness. It wasn't until they reached those final steps did that aura change. They were smiling. The silent energy that had passed between them was now positive. They were going to give this their all. From the car, me and Nezu watched patiently. The events that were to come would no doubt alter pretty much everything. They were risking so much with this. There was so much on the line. The door opened. A man stood in the door. Confusion on his face. Then anger. Finger pointing. He was telling them to leave. All Might took his hat off. The anger stopped. Words were winning. Tears. Hugging. Inside, I let out a breath and slouched down into my seat when I saw the door close behind All Might and Sorahiriko and not in front. That was good. It meant the family was likely going to talk to them. And that hug, it was promising. It was amazing what a few words would be able to do. Especially in a world like this. Well then, Nezu flopped down into the seat and looked up at me expectantly. "While they connect, why don't we go get some food? I read reviews that there's a good burger place near here. Shouldn't we wait?" Even as I asked that, I started my car up again and was already checking my mirrors. I had been craving a burger for a while now, and while I did grab one or two from a McDonald's while on patrol, I really couldn't call that a real burger. "And you eat meat?" Nezu clicked his heels and laughed. "I am an omnivore, you know. Besides, sitting there waiting for them would be boring, and they're able to handle themselves."
He had me at burger. The burger place was pretty much what I would have expected for a place in Japan. Clean, flashy, expertly crafted, and small. I honestly felt like the square burger I got would be something I could eat in a single bite if I wanted to. But the smell made up for that tenfold. With a bag of burgers and fries, I dived back into my car to feed Nezu. The burger tasted every bit as good as it smelled. Nezu held his with both hands and seemed to enjoy his own first bite immensely, even going so far as to take a couple of French fries and place them inside the burger. Clearly, Nezu was a man of culture. Thank you, Enji. While the food at UA isn't the worst, I must admit I had been craving something new for quite some time, and this was a perfect chance. "Oh, so that's why you wanted to come. Figured you just wanted out of UA even if it was just in my car." I muttered in between small flavor-filled bites of my burger. It was so good. I needed to take my family here. Or maybe just Tuya when he did something good. I remember those special meals of just me and my dad going out when I did good in school, but I think going for the whole family would be best. Nezu half nodded and hummed to himself. "That's part of it, but I wanted to talk about your actions as a hero." "Huh?" I asked, before finishing a bite, and I swallowed. Was this like when my boss was trying to give me a review or something during lunch? Wait, Nezu wasn't my boss. My boss was basically the government and the citizens in general. Maybe the hero administration? Did I fuck up? Depends on who you ask. Nezu wiped his paws and grabbed his cell phone, which was actually larger than my own. He tapped on it for a few moments and then turned it to me. It was a video. "Endeavor, a moment please." The reporter came running up to me with a microphone in her hand. There was a bit of fire on me that I hadn't been aware of at the time as I remembered that quirk-based robbery. I kind of felt bad for those kids at the time. "Huh?" I watched myself turn to face the reporter with one hell of a stupid look on my face. Did I always look like I was contemplating what kind of condiment I wanted on my sandwich? I guess it was better than resting bitch face, but still. "Oh, sure. Ah yes, my great people skills." Though to be honest, I didn't really remember this interview. Well, I did, but I didn't remember exactly what I said. "Really?" the reporter asked as she straightened her outfit, the camera walking around to the side of me. "All right, people have been wondering what's with the softer, more peaceful endeavor. You've been seen talking down several conflicts as opposed to your usually more violent approach, and people have been wondering, what's changed?" I watched myself blink, and then shrug. I was about to talk without thinking, again. "Well, heroes are supposed to save people, right? I think that includes villains too, and a lot of the time it's just people losing control of their quirk for a second. I paused in the video and remembered exactly what I was about to say. I think that a lot of people are so terrified about using their quirks that they end up using it accidentally. It's not their fault most of the time, and if I can avoid fighting them, I think I should. The video ended and I looked at the title, Endeavor, Meta Liberation Supporter? Oh right. That was a thing in this world, huh? Well shit, I muttered, watching Nezu place his phone down and take a bite out of his burger again. Please tell me that didn't go viral. It has. Shit, but I don't think it's a bad thing. Nezu took another bite of his food. I read up on the original Meta Liberation Army, and even found a copy of Destro's book. While their methods were too extreme, I did agree with their goals to a degree, and I think you're hitting a nerve in Japan. People are now talking about the criminal justice system, they're talking about quirks and their suppression. I'm quite eager to see where this goes, aren't you? I let out a sigh and took a bite of my burger. It didn't taste as good. I'm not much of a leader, certainly not of any movement, and not one of this size, I suppose. But I'm not someone that people should look to for guidance. I'm just a person. You're a hero that doesn't want to be a hero, a leader that doesn't want to lead, and a father that never wanted to be a father. Nezu finished his burger with a happy sigh and smiled up at me, his dark black eyes glittering with a mixture of intelligence and mirth. Personally, I think that makes you more worthy of the title of #1 hero than All Might. But I think having both, you and All Might at the top, him representing safety, peace, stability, and you representing change, is absolutely wonderful and just what Japan needs. I swallowed the last of my burger and shrugged. I'm not really trying to change the world, Nezu. I just said something. And people listened. You're the #2 hero for a reason. People will look up to you, they will listen to you, and it's too late for not wanting to change the world. You're already doing just that. Nezu stood in the seat and looked at me. I think if you keep going forward, just as you are, people will notice. Just avoid becoming directly involved. Great, I'm fairly certain that starting a political movement was one hell of a butterfly effect. All right. I nodded and checked the time. No missed calls from anyone and no texts either. Apparently they were still talking at the Shimura's. You mind if we take care of some errands before I take you back to UA? Ooh, exciting. Where shall we go? Nezu laughed, sitting back down in the front seat and buckling in, though the upper part of the seatbelt was behind his back. I shrugged. I want to stop by the courthouse. All Might's meeting with the Shimura was considered a success. While I didn't know how much they were told, I knew that they probably avoided All for One and Nana giving All Might his quirk. But it sounded like All Might was going to be invited back. No mention of a son yet though, and the wife didn't appear to be pregnant. Which was good. Maybe. Still, the situation was hopeful. More hopeful than my own situation at any rate. 4XI knocked softly on her door and held my breath for a few seconds. Ray, it's me, Enji, do you have a moment? The papers in my hands felt like they weighed a ton. But ultimately, they should be the right move. For both of us. Divorce was never a pretty thing. I wasn't too familiar with how it was in Japan, but I could easily imagine it being bad for both parties. Not to mention the children. I had seen divorces secondhand through my friends. I had heard the arguments of their parents when I stayed over, and I remembered how their parents' divorce could change them. But I had to give Ray the choice. She deserved it. Oh, sure. Ray's voice was startled, though I was fairly certain that she could hear me through the entire house as I walked to her room. Come in. I opened the door and stepped into Ray's room for the first time. It was cooler than just about any room in the house, with a fan blowing softly in the corner, as well as her own ceiling fan rotating softly. It was small, but homey, with her own TV and a nightstand where a tablet was being charged. There was a window right next to her bed that overlooked the courtyard. She closed her book and looked at me, smiling softly. What is it? Well, with the kids in bed, I thought it would be a good idea for us to have that talk. About, who I am. She blinked, twisted on her bed so that her legs dangled off of. She tapped lightly on an empty spot next to her and nodded. Have a seat, I've been looking forward to this. Just, try to keep your fire to a minimum. Sorry, I'm not exactly the best at controlling it still. I chuckled and felt like an awkward oaf as I moved to sit next to Ray on the bed. I stared at the divorce papers in my hand and took a deep breath. So, like I said, I'm not Endeavor. Like, not in the slightest, but I have all of his memories and all of my own memories, which includes some future events as well, and I knew that he treated you poorly and... I stumbled my way through explaining what I knew to Ray, avoiding topics like that whole one for all mess and the whole knowing about the future because it was a manga. I wasn't exactly sure how much she believed, but she was accepting of a lot of it. I see, and you really have no idea why you suddenly replaced Endeavor? Ray asked, staring down at her floor. I shook my head and sighed. Not a clue. I just woke up in his body. Would it be wrong if I say I'm grateful? Ray's voice was still so soft as she turned to look up to the ceiling. At the start he was fine, he at least tried a bit. But after Tuya's quirk wasn't what he wanted, he grew more aggressive each day. So, when you say about him, she paused, leaving the unsaid words to speak louder than anything spoken. And me ending up in the hospital, as scary as it sounds, I think that was going to happen, especially since he wouldn't take no for an answer. Was it normal to want to punch yourself? Wait, I always wanted to do that a lot. But, right now I wanted to reach through time and space and throttle Endeavor. That won't happen. I promise. I believe you. Ray nodded and looked at me. Her smile was still small, still charming, and was quickly becoming my weakness. Do you mind if I ask you some questions about yourself? Your old self? I nodded. Sure, but there's really not much. What did you do? I was a banker, teacher, and an inspiring writer. I smiled. Never really thought that I'd ever be a hero. Ray nodded and ran a hand through her hair. Oh, well, that explains why you're so good with Fuyumi and Tuya. What were your hobbies? I was a massive nerd. Really? Ray gave a fake gasp. Like, video games and anime? Like D&D, board games, and built my own computer, nerd. I also owned a lightsaber. I blinked and thought about it for a second. Could I make my own lightsaber with my quirk? Probably. It also probably wouldn't be useful. But yes, also video games and anime, though I did mostly just enjoy writing. And how old were you? Ray asked, tilting her head to the side and tapping on her chin. Well, I was 25. So, that's pretty much the same. I'm not so sure. Ray hummed. You have the memories of two 25-year-olds, so wouldn't that make you 50? I made a frustrated snort and huffed. No, Ray must have thought that was hilarious, because she started to giggle, and it made my own frustration just melt away. I glanced down at the divorce papers in my hand, my own signature already signed onto the document. I took a deep breath and handed them to Ray. Here, I said slowly. These are. Ray tore the papers up and tossed them onto the floor. Divorce papers, right? I blinked and opened my mouth. Honestly, I didn't expect that. A quiet refusal, a tearful acceptance, but to see the hours I had spent waiting at the courthouse and talking to a lawyer get torn up in a matter of seconds, that wasn't one. Her hand fell onto my arm. It was cold. I know why you think you have to do this, Enji. And I'm really flattered by the idea. But I stayed married to a man I feared for my children. I can stay married to someone I trust for them as well. Relief swelled inside of me as I choked out a smile. I honestly didn't want a divorce. It just felt like it was the right thing to do. I just thought you deserved your own chance at happiness. Her hand fell on my shoulder and she pushed lightly. Our eyes met, and I could feel my heart pounding against my chest. And you don't think that you can make me happy? Enji, you shouldn't think so lightly of yourself. Also, she stood on her bed and I felt her gold fingers press onto my head. A light sizzling followed. Your hair was on fire. Sorry about that. I laughed, feeling a large laugh come boiling out from me. And thank you, Ray. I'll try. You'll define. I do have rather low standards at this point. Ouch. She laughed again and sat down next to me. A bit closer now. Now, why don't you tell me about D&D and these board games you played? Papa. Fuyumi came running around the corner and slammed into my leg with the speed and force only a toddler could muster. She hugged my leg tight with her entire body, in what had become a nearly daily ritual with her. Not to be outdone, Tuya flew from around the corner and tackled my leg as well. You're home. Home. No, I'm Dad. I'd love to claim that being an actual father for these past few months had forced some kind of metaphysical evolution within my soul that made me spew out dad jokes on a moment's notice. But really, I've been saying dad jokes since I was Tuya's age. Tuya dug his chin into my leg and glared up at me. Fuyumi just smiled. Papa, can you cast fireball? Totally, now come on, let's go see your mom. It always baffled me how easy it was to slip into a routine, how quickly things became normal. Even for a drastic change as this to my life, it had only taken 4 months before I stopped feeling like I was waking up in the wrong bed. Coming home was autopilot now, as I no longer had to double check where I was on my way back. Things were comfortable. Not just for me but for All Might as well. Things with the Shimuras were going well, though they still weren't expecting a child yet. I'd never say it out loud, but there was a good chance that All Might have cock-blocked Tamura out of existence. Which was, odd. Then again, at this point, I might have done the exact same thing to Natsuo. At this point, my relationship with Ray was that of roommates, friends, and parents. In theory, the romance was there. Or at least I thought it was. We were kind of flirting, I think. Maybe? It's really hard to actively be romantic with 2 kids that aren't even in school yet, especially with how long and generally exhausting being a hero was. The old Endeavor was an insane madman that worked upwards of 14-plus-hour days. But I wanted to be home enough to make sure that my family, and it was my family now, was happy. And I really think I was doing a good job, as made evident by my kids grabbing onto my legs and refusing to let go even as I walked. I remember doing something similar to my father when I was their age. I took long, wide steps, both Tuya and Fuyumi giggling as I waddled through my house like I was treading water. With their guidance, I managed to find Rei. She was in the kitchen. Her bright white hair was pulled into a ponytail and her light blue apron matched well with her black long-sleeved shirt. Just seeing her made me smile. She was easily my best friend in this world. Sure, I could call All Might and Nezu my friends, but that was different. Probably because I spent so much time with Rei. And I still wanted to find more time with her. Mama, Fuyumi called, tossing her head back while she continued to cling to me like a cute hyperactive sloth. We found Papa. Oh, you found me? I asked holding my leg up. Fuyumi laughed. Yeah. Oh, okay. Rei, they found me. I shrugged, still holding my leg up and pulling Fuyumi off me. Why were kids so good at grabbing onto things? Rei turned towards us. Her smile made getting punched earlier today feel like it didn't even happen. There was just something about smiles, the way that they just kind of happened, the way that they just made other people smile too. But Rei's smile was special. It just made everything feel right. They did? Rei kneeled down onto the ground and held out her hand. Great job, Fuyumi.
Fuyumi dropped off my leg, landing on her feet and darted over towards her mother to give Rei a big hug.
Rei stood after a moment, her gray eyes locked onto mine. Somehow, I was more nervous talking to her than I was fighting villains or telling All Might off. Welcome home. Her smile grew wide, her eyes shut, and her head tilted just enough to the side. It was like she was smiling with her whole body. Enji. I got a tingle in the back of my spine when she said my name. It wasn't like she never called me that, but there was something special about the way she said it. To everyone else, I was Endeavor. To my children I was Dad. But to Rei, I was just Enji. That made her special. All Might didn't count. Same with Nezu. Thank you, Rei. I stared at her, completely dumbfounded as I looked at her. I was fairly certain that my mouth was open. I shook my head a bit and gathered myself. Do you need any help? She laughed and pointed a spoon at me. Go wash up first, then you can help me in the kitchen. Yeah, you stink, Dad, Tuya said, still holding onto my leg. Stinky. Fuyumi echoed, hiding behind her mother's leg now. I honestly had no idea what my daughter thought of me. Sometimes she was a daddy's girl, other times she was jumping in to team up against me. Maybe she was just laying both sides. Fine, I'll go take a shower. I lifted up my Tuya-covered leg and looked at my red-headed son, poking him on the forehead. Unless you want to get washed with my suit, I suggest you let go. Tuya stuck his tongue out at me. Oh, before that, Rei muttered and took another step towards me, but stopped. Are you going in this weekend? I blinked and paused, going through my memories as I tried to figure out if there was anything important happening this weekend. It wasn't a birthday or anything like that. I don't think so. Why? Oh good, we can talk later then. But now, hurry, or I'll finish cooking before you can help me. I gasped. You wouldn't? Try me. With a mock-feared face that had Tuya giggling, I darted out of the kitchen and took a quick shower, making certain to scrub as quick as I possibly could. With my quirk, drying was actually really quick and easy. But even with that, it was all for naught. By the time I arrived, Rei had already finished the meal and the kids were sitting at the table looking at me with annoyed, hungry faces. Too slow, Rei half-sung, winking at me with playful mirth. Dinner, dishes, training, bath, bedtime stories had become so routine now that they didn't even feel as chaotic as they once did. Once again, Tuya seemed to like his training. He was fully devoted to becoming a hero and wanted to be just like me. Actually, he wanted to be just like All Might, but technicalities. The highlight of my nights, however, were those 20 minutes spent reading with Fuyumi alongside Rei. It was like dancing with words, and something we had both grown to love. Once both kids were tucked in and the hour grew late, Rei pulled me aside.
Enji, she asked softly, grabbing onto the sleeve of my shirt. Her hair was still in that ponytail that was the physical embodiment of all my weaknesses. Her smile was small, sleepy, and drained, but filled with so much life that I couldn't help but smile back. I stared at her for a moment, the dull light of the hallway, amplified for a moment when my shoulder caught fire. I put it out with a light touch. I nodded. Rei.
She gave a soft lip bite that was really just killer. Could you come with me for a while? I nodded and followed her to the living room. A blanket was neatly folded onto the couch, and several pillows were catered about on top of it. On the table were light drinks and snacks as well. I was honestly more surprised that those had gone untouched with Tuya and Fuyumi in the house.
I've been trying to figure out a better way for us to spend time together. Rei shrugged and made her way over to the couch. Without the kids, and I kind of took inspiration from what you told me.
What did I tell you? Honestly, I told her a lot. I moved over and sat down on the couch next to her. An entire tuya of empty space was between us. Ray nodded and pulled her legs up onto the couch, forcing her to scoot just a bit closer. Well, you mentioned that you enjoyed staying up just a bit too late watching shows and other stuff, and Ray paused, her head making a small bob as she tried to find the right words. Read online that watching shows is better with a friend, so I figured, why don't we find a good series to watch and watch an episode or two a night? Just the two of us, after the kids are asleep. I wanted to scream. That sounds like a great idea, Ray. My ability to play it cool was sabotaged by my inability to not randomly catch fire. I slapped my head and relished Ray's small laugh. Did you have a show in mind? Ray nodded. Yep, I think it's something that we'll both enjoy.
I will trust your judgment. I smiled and relaxed onto the couch. Should I try to make a move? I mean, she was my wife, right? And she did say she wanted to stay married, and I was pretty sure that Ray at least kind of liked me. Well, she did have low standards compared to her last husband. Wait, what does this have to do with this weekend? Oh, Ray sat up and pulled her hair free from her ponytail. A glorious moment that in the dull light made it look like she had stars tangled up in her hair. Well, I was talking to my parents.
Was this going to be another meeting with them? The last one I went to, both her mother and father had glared at me for the better part of dinner. It was uncomfortable. And they agreed that they'd be willing to watch the kids for the day. Ray shrugged. Maybe even have them stay the night. I blinked. A day without kids? A night without kids? Wait. No, that was the wrong way to look at it. A day with just Ray. The idea both excited and terrified me. I was instantly looking forward to it. The weekend was just one day away. Maybe we could drop them off tomorrow, and I could come home early, and then I could have nearly a whole weekend with just Ray. What would we even do? What would I even do? My best idea for a date was exactly this. Netflix and chill was pretty much the only thing in my playbook. Sure, sometimes there was dinner involved, but when it came to actual dates I just didn't know what to do because I never really had that much cash to. Wait. I had money. I literally owned a home. I coughed for no reason and scratched the back of my head. That sounds great. I'm sure the kids would enjoy it. Ray nodded. But we should do something then. Her eyes sparkled and she nodded eagerly, her hair taking a life of its own for just a moment. That's the plan. Did you have something in mind? I asked as I started to wonder what exactly would do for a weekend kid-free getaway. Was this a date? I'm going to assume yes. That's why there were no kids involved. Ray nodded again. I was hoping we could go to Asakusa. The old part of Tokyo. Ray started again, wiggling slightly. I want to wear kimonos and walk around the down. That sounds amazing. I smiled at her. Thank God I didn't have to come up with the date. I'm looking forward to the weekend even more now. Ray nodded and scooted a bit closer. There was less than a fuyumi between us. She stopped and looked at the TV. Oh right, the show. Let's get comfortable, alright. NG, the blanket. The blanket was a tactical length. In order for both of us to be covered, we would practically have to be sitting cushion to cushion. Which was fine with me. I was a cuddler. The show hooked us both immediately. Ray's eyes were locked onto the TV and I had to choose between watching her watch it and actually watching the show. Every so often she would catch me watching her and smile. It felt like each episode the distance between us shrunk until, on the fourth, or was it fifth, episode we were touching, arm to arm, leg to leg. Ray's soft skin was wonderfully cold against mine. The last thing I remembered was Ray's head falling against my shoulder. Dad. I heard Tuya yelling at me as I struggled to fully wake up. My back was stiff, and it felt like my neck had been screwed on completely wrong. I blinked and saw the blue screen of the TV in front of me. Tuya standing in his pajamas. I wasn't in my bedroom. Did I fall asleep on the... Much more important than that, I felt a weight move off my side and I saw Ray give a long yawn and a stretch that had me blushing. There was nothing lewd about it, nothing that I should be blushing about, but, just seeing her so early in the morning, stretching so lightly as she had just woken up, was worth everything. I wanted to savor that image. Tuya had other ideas. Dad. He pushed on my arm, again. There's someone with a pointy nose here for you. He's at the door? Huh? I blinked and shook my head. Why did you answer the door? Tuya shrugged. He was knocking really loud. Right. I stood and gave Ray one last glance as she wiped the sleep from her eyes. She shrugged and fell down into the empty spot where I had been. If only I had my phone on me. I stumbled and made my way over towards the front door. Tuya had left it open, and the man standing there didn't seem familiar to me. Though Tuya was right, he did have a large pointed nose. The man had orange hair and was wearing a black pinstripe suit with a green dress shirt underneath it and a matching tie. He had a wide smile that was just the right kind of slimy for me to want to shut the door in his face. Besides, I was mildly annoyed that I had been woken up and couldn't enjoy Ray sleeping on me. Ah, there he is. The man extended his arms wide. The talk of the town, Endeavor. I yawned. Sorry, I just woke up. Who are you and what exactly do you want? Me? I'm Rikiya Yotubashi, and I must say it's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Todoroki. Rikiya gave a light bow. I'm the president and CEO of the Deku Company. We're dedicated to producing items that will help those with quirks live a normal life. I was hoping that we could have a chat. That was a lesson that my mother told me, though in her oh so elegant words it was, don't get butt-jacked, chances are if she were to see me now, she'd be wondering why the hell I was a ginger and then slap me when she found out I had willingly gotten into the car of not just a complete and utter stranger, but someone that was technically ever so slightly a bad guy. I just hoped Tuya and Fuyumi would make better life choices than me. What's wrong, Endeavor? You seem on edge. Well, more on edge than you've seemed recently. Rikiya Yatsubashi, better known as Destro, reclined in the seat of his car, smiling as we were chauffeured to the current headquarters of the Deku Company. I shrugged, trying not to let my irritation be known. I hadn't gotten a chance to really say goodbye to Ray or the kids this morning, and had been rushed into my hero suit so fast I was fairly certain that at least something was on backwards. Not to mention the fact that a villain had just knocked on my door like a nosy neighbor. Sorry, I dislike having other people drive for me. It wasn't really a lie, I hated being driven places by people I didn't trust. Rikiya laughed. Is that so? Well, it shouldn't be for too much longer, so bear with it, will you? I grunted and nodded. The silence that followed didn't sit well with Rikiya, and he ran a hand through his full orange hair and gave a nervous chuckle. I should perhaps apologize for showing up at your house unannounced. You see, when I became aware of your recent actions as a hero, I knew that I had to meet with you. I'm not interested in a sponsorship, if that's what you're offering. I crossed my arms and reclined back. On the one hand, I shouldn't be too outwardly hostile towards him as I really didn't want to fight him if I could avoid it. But at the same time, I wasn't sure if I should be doing business with him. Rikiya gave a dejected sigh. I had expected as much, but I am interested in your views. Damn it. And I believe you are as well, that's why you agreed to this, didn't you? I shook my head. Anyone willing to show up to my front door is the type of person that would do so again until I heard them out. I'm here for my own benefit. Haha, sorry. I did try calling your agency, but your voicemail was full. Intentionally, I didn't like random people calling me. The only people that had my cell phone number were Ray, All Might, and Nezu. Well, those were the only ones whose phone calls I didn't dread. It was one of the few things that Endeavor and I actually had in common. Though, he was a more shrewd businessman than me. Rikiya clapped his hands. I'm glad my apparent persistence has already paid off. So, what exactly do you want? I asked. He gave a smarmy smile and pushed his hair back again. I simply wish to judge your character, to get to know you better, and perhaps, put us on the road to becoming steadfast allies. Was I being recruited into the Meta Liberation Army? Was the Liberation Army even refounded yet? Could I prevent its founding? Maybe I could even repurpose it from an actual fighting force to a more peaceful organization. I needed more information and a long talk with Nezu after this. Fine, I'll hear what you have to say, I grunted. Well, I already was in their car, on the way to their headquarters. But, Rikiya, how old are you? Oh me? I'm 23, not too much younger than you are. 23 and the CEO and president of a whole company? Then again, I was the number 2 pro hero with 2 kids and a wife at the age of 25. Still, if he was that young, there was a decent chance that he might be planning on forming the MLA soon, but he could also be pushed off of that path. You must be rather impressive if you were able to gain control of a company at such a young age. Rikiya gave a flattered laugh. 4x. The tour of the company felt like the first initial run down any place would give you once they decided you were worth hiring. Here's the toilet, here's our copy room, here's the break room, here's where the magic happens, here's where we'd commit crimes, if we were doing any of that. Rikiya showed off a lot of their products as well, a fireproof clothing line, transformation-resistant clothing, and various other items designed to just improve the lifestyle of those that had quirks. They were a company filling in a niche that quirks had brought about. On the surface, there was nothing wrong with anything that I was shown or told. But under the surface, I still wasn't sure about their motives. This was a man that in 20 years would kill his own employee for making fun of his bald head. He wasn't a villain, not yet, but unlike Shigaraki, he was still an adult. Damn, this was too much responsibility for me all of a sudden. And this? Rikiya stepped out of the elevator with a flourish, showing off what I assumed to be his office, A large table with a diorama sat in the middle of the room, which showed a small town in the mountains. Are our plans for the future? You see, we're doing rather well for how young our company is, which is a testament to how many people have quirks that make living a normal life difficult. We're planning on relocating to Deka City. Once we're there, we're going to integrate ourselves with the city and attempt to promote growth and stability. A modern company town, if you will. How ambitious, I said, glancing down at the city. How on earth were they going to get a city that massive to turn into mostly supporters of the MLA? Then again, maybe things like that were more possible in heavily populated areas? Wouldn't that be a bit too taxing to make a real impact on a city this size? Oh, that's the expected growth after 20 or so years. The city is actually much smaller now, but I hope to see it swell with like-minded individuals in the future. Ah, so his power base wasn't that great yet. Still, he finally slipped up and gave me something to target. All my years of talking politics on Facebook and getting mad at my uncle were about to pay off. What do you mean by like-minded individuals? Like a true businessman, Rikia didn't even blink. Exactly what I said, and I'd like to think you're in that group endeavor, given what you've said several times now. Well, shit. I remained silent, doing my best to keep my face neutral as I considered everything.
I hadn't found him doing anything illegal yet, and even if I did, I was just supposed to fight those using their quirks. White-collar stuff wasn't something heroes were supposed to deal with. Even if I baited him with my knowledge to confess he's trying to restart the Meta Liberation Army, there was nothing that I could do as a hero. Not until he used his quirk, at least. And quite frankly, I wasn't entirely certain I wanted to fight his quirk. Not alone at any rate. Rikia walked over to a bookshelf and calmly pulled out a book with a red and black cover. This is the Meta Liberation War, written by Chikara Yatsubashi, better known as Destro, leader of the Meta Liberation Army. Have you read it? I have not. I unfolded my arms and accepted the book when it was presented to me, though I am familiar with our recent history. We were children at the time, we could barely say that we lived through it. I grunted and looked at the book. Its edges were worn, the corners were rounded, and there was wear on the pages. This was a book that had been read many times, but the memories are still there. Rikia nodded, turning to lean his back against the table. True, but what are your thoughts on their cause? Many people are claiming that you're a supporter of the Meta Liberation Army. The idea that people should be free to use their quirks is a good one. I admitted, turning the book over in my hand. I glanced at it for a second before keeping my eyes squarely on Rikia. The original quirk laws were designed to make people forget about quirks, to try and keep that pre-quirk society intact. Yes, that's it. Rikia nodded, a smile growing on his face. When they were designed, the majority of people were still quirkless, nearly half I believe. But, as time went on and more people were born with quirks, many began to feel that those laws were strangling their ability to live happily. What was the point of flying if you could only use that quirk if you wanted to become a hero? Why couldn't someone that could make flowers bloom become a florist? To those who wanted to use their quirk, it was become a hero, or become a villain. Rikia continued to nod, his eyes closed. Clearly I was preaching to the choir. Now, it's possible to work for the government and receive a quirk permit, but that's still not comfortable for some people. I let out a sigh and felt the weight of the book in my hand. I could all but feel the value that Rikia put into this book. To him it was the only way he had to communicate with his father. So yes, I do believe that the laws should be changed. I walked forward and handed him back his book, but not through terrorism. Rikia's smile vanished, and a dark blob appeared on his face. What? How could you say that he's a terrorist? They were fighting for our rights. How? 21 years ago. My voice boomed, stopping Rikia in his tracks. I let my anger get the best of me, and I could feel my flames roaring. I reached down into the depths of Endeavor's mind and pulled out his earliest memory. I was 4. I was staying with my grandmother while I was waiting for my parents to get back from the hospital. I was going to have a new sister. Destro, in the name of quirk liberation, bombed a civilian train station. It was true for Endeavor. In most memories, I could tell what he was feeling, but this time was different. I found myself shaking despite the calmness in my voice. Rikia said nothing, just stared down as he began to shake, that black appearing and vanishing on his face over and over again. Acts of terror are the worst way to get change to come. They turn the hearts of the very people you're trying to save against you, and they destroy sympathy. I calmed myself down and ran my head over my hair, putting out the fire that had sprouted there. Rikia was shaking, and I wasn't sure if it was anger at what I said, or the frustration that came with being unable to convince people into your way of thinking. Maybe both. He had called me here thinking I would be a future ally for him. He sniffed, and wiped his nose slightly. Then, how do we make change? I shrugged. I'm not sure. I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm just being a hero, and trying to do what I think is right. For some reason,
People are listening to that. I didn't want to start changing things. But, like you said, people are talking about it. It pains me to admit it. Rikia choked out, smiling as he looked at his father's book. But, I do think you're right. Well, that was easy. Was talking to people really that easy? Wait, this was an anime world. Talk no jutsu was all powerful. But, I actually want to change the laws. I want people to be free to use their quirks. I don't know of any way but this. I scratched the back of my head and shrugged. I'm just a meathead with a big mouth and too many opinions, but I think if you make your opinions known, and then wait for the time to be right, you might be able to make a decent run as a politician. Ha! Rikia let out a shrill laugh, that turned into a real gut buster that had him clutching onto his stomach. After nearly a minute, he gathered himself. I think I might try that endeavor, thank you. No problem, I extended a hand out towards him. Just don't ask me to speak on your behalf. I'll vote for you if I like you, but I want to stay out of politics. Completely understandable. Rikia shoved the book into my hand and shook it hard. I doubt this will change your mind, but why not give it a read anyways? It may help you understand me a bit more. Great, now I was getting homework from a future villain I just turned into an aspiring politician. Soon the future was going to be drastically different from the one I knew about. But, that was what Nezu and All Might were trying to do, right? I wonder how this would affect it. I hope I'd still be able to enjoy time with my family. We left on amicable terms, with me choosing to give Rikia my phone number purely so he wouldn't randomly show up at my doorstep. Wearing a yukata was a bit like wearing an overly complex bathrobe, only significantly less comfortable, but that could just be because my own skin was feeling uncomfortable right now. I was nervous, more nervous than I had ever been for a first date in my entire life. And it wasn't like I was going out with some stranger, it was with Rei, the woman I had spent countless hours with since I had come to this world, and my best friend. In theory I shouldn't be nervous. She was, technically, my wife. Legally speaking at any rate. We never actually had a marriage, and back when she married Endeavor it was purely a loveless affair. He wanted her quirk, and she needed his money. Which might be why I was so nervous. It wasn't as simple as just making things right, in some ways I'd already done that, and tried to. She was the one that ripped up the divorce papers. No, the reason why I was so nervous was simple. I wanted a romance with Rei. Or, at least I wanted to try for one. It was pure selfishness on my part, but I wanted to make her smile every time we made eye contact. Maybe I was just being desperate for that personal connection with her, but I really wanted this to work out. I wanted a family life that was filled with love and laughter. Maybe it was all those wants that was why I was so nervous, maybe it was because it was Rei, and I still felt guilty over things that weren't ever going to happen. It could have been for any number of reasons, but in the end my nervousness stemmed from the feeling of powerlessness that came in the moments before the date really began. Though, I doubt Rei would stand me up, because we lived in the same house, and even traveled here together. I glanced at my dark blue kimono, and felt the soft fabric of my sleeve. Once more I glanced at my reflection in the mirror. My dark red hair and blue eyes took some getting used to, but these features were now comfortably familiar to me. Compared to how Endeavor wore his hair, I was in desperate need of a haircut, but I think the slightly longer look made me look more approachable. Though, I did still have his resting bitch face, or did I bring that with me? It was probably a combination of the two. I had a feeling you'd look good in a kimono. My attention was on Rei the moment she entered the room. The minutes I had spent waiting for her had been worth it 1,000-fold, and I now fully understood the beauty of a kimono. Her kind gray eyes were locked onto me with a kind of warmth that made my quirk feel like nothing. Her kimono shined with all of winter's beauty. The upper parts were a pure snow white that matched Rei's hair in a way that made my head spin, and as the pattern descended downwards, blue fractures, crystals, and snowflakes began to form, which made her outfit look like it was a blizzard turned to cloth. It hugged her slender figure perfectly, its flashiness only adding to her beauty. But the part that fascinated me the most was her hair. I had never seen her hair actually up. Sure, I was a sucker for ponytails, and Rei had pulled those out with increasing frequency, but that wasn't exactly up. No, this time her hair was pulled up into an elegant bun on the back of her head, held in place by a blue rindo. Her favorite flower, flanked by two smaller white flowers. On each side of her face, a tuft of hair that was curled to perfection. There was even a hint of makeup that hadn't been there before. It almost felt like this wasn't even the same day that I had driven here with Rei. I'm not a dentist, Enji. Rei placed a hand on my chest, smiling at me, her purse dangling from her arm. You can close your mouth. I snapped my mouth shut and looked at her again. It didn't matter how dressed up Rei was. Her smile was always the star of the show. At least until her laugh showed up. Rei gave a cute giggle that had my entire body bubbling with giddiness and completely smashed the nervous fit I had worked up to myself. I guess I should take that as a compliment though. Rei gave a slight wink and then spun around, her sandals tapping against the floor. Though, I wouldn't mind hearing you. Her wrist fell into my hand when she made a full revolution. Her eyes met mine and my mouth made noises before my brain could properly catch up. You're beautiful, Ray. Here, now, always. Ray's smile vanished, her eyes were wide, and her cheeks flushed. She stared at me for a peaceful moment, that was both ruined and enhanced by the squealing of the younger clerk. Ah, I hope when I'm married my husband will treat me like that. Her mother, I guess, swatted her in the arm and rolled her eyes. Keep up with your taste in men and you won't. Damn, and I thought I was the one with the fire quirk. I doubted I could cause a burn quite that serve. Still, it made me feel much better that maybe I was doing something right with Ray. Right. Ray laughed and straightened her kimono slightly, her hand falling out of mine. Well, shall we? Sure. My voice was probably a bit too loud and I shrunk down slightly. I mean, sure. I opened the door for her and we headed out into the historic area of Tokyo. You really do look beautiful, by the way. Enji, if you keep that up, I'm going to start thinking that you're trying to flirt with me. Ray hummed. Both hands crossed in front of her as we walked. I wanted to hold her hand. I wanted to hug her. I wanted to pick her up, spin her around and laugh, but that might be going too far. I scratched the back of my head, battling the duality of being unable to look away from Ray, and not wanting to stare at her too much. Despite the butterflies in my stomach, I could feel a smile creep up on my face. It was the kind of smile that appeared just from walking beside a pretty girl, amplified by the fact that I was on a date with said pretty girl. Am I not supposed to? Well, Ray hummed, leaning to the side just enough to bump me with her shoulder. We are married, aren't we? Great. Now if only I knew how to flirt. Somehow, despite fancying myself a romance writer, I had no idea how to actually flirt. My basic line was girl pretty. What was I supposed to say? What was I supposed to do? I mean, what were we even supposed to talk about on a date? What did we talk about in the car ride over here? I know we talked, but I couldn't remember what. It was just talk. So, I started just to get my mouth moving normally. When it started making noise, more noises would just come out of it. What made you want to come here? Oh, well, Ray gave a light laugh, holding her hand in front of her mouth slightly as we passed through a winding street filled with old Japanese-style houses. We were heading towards a park, and then through there towards a palace, after which we'd find some place to eat. You're going to think it's silly. If it's why I'm here with you now, then it's not silly. Well, when I was little my grandma used to take me to a similar place in Kyoto. We would wear kimonos, walk around, and drink tea. She always said that I was made to wear a kimono, and I just thought that it would be a fun date. Besides, I wanted to see what you'd look like in kimono. I spread my arms wide and gave her my biggest smile. Well, how'd I look? Like a giant adorable teddy bear. So I'm Totoro and you're a Yuki Onna. Yes. But I doubt you'll be turning into a bus, and I certainly hope I don't end up turning to mist. I'll make sure you don't. Ray gave a soft laugh and pulled on my arm. Hey, Enji, let's try some on. Huh? Oh. Okay. We all but sprinted towards the stand where a wide variety of masks were set out on the street. Some were simple, just cute little face masks. Others more ornate. There were Tengu masks, cute rabbit masks, cunning fox masks, grinning cats, ferocious tiger masks, and I grabbed the mask that really caught my attention and smiled at it. Was this really something I was about to do? The weeb in me said yes. What do you think? Ray turned to me with a white and blue fox mask on her face. It was too late. I had the frog mask on, my hands outstretched like a classical Japanese play actor, as I hoped on one foot. From the east to the west, north, and south, I am the man with no enemies. Jiraiya, the toad sage. Ray stared at me for a second, and then snorted, her bubbling giggle quickly turning into full-blown laughter. What? I stood straight and shrugged. Nothing, I like your mask. She kept laughing from behind her mask, up until we decided to purchase both masks and even beyond as we made our way towards the first of a dozen or so snack booths. All things considered, this date was going pretty good. I got Ray to laugh a bunch, and we'd only just began. We meandered through the park, crossing over at least 100 bridges as the path jumped from island to island. The soft sounds of nature felt so away from the city just on the horizon, it was enough to make me feel alone. But not the dreadful loneliness that came from staying up too late and not going out. No, this the good kind of alone, the kind that was shared with someone. So, Ray started, using the same tactic I did earlier. How do you like being a hero? I let out a long sigh, that had my entire body deflating. Honestly? Honestly, Ray nodded, her hand falling on top of my arm for a second. You can trust me, I know you're not really fond of it. In a way, it's nice feeling like I'm making a difference. The fact that I had a meeting with a future extremist and set him on the road of being a politician might have gone to my head a bit. But I could go without getting punched so often. And I'd love to have more time off. Well, if you ever get punched hard enough I wouldn't mind taking care of you, Ray said. She then stopped and tilted her head to the side. That came out wrong, please don't get hurt. I let out a deep belly laugh that was loud enough to scare a bird out of a nearby tree. Ha! I was about to say that'd be motivation to get hurt. If you end up in the hospital I'll be mad at you. I'll do my best to avoid that. The hospital? No, you, getting mad at me. Her smile returned and she bounced against my side once more. But what about you? I asked as we started crossing yet another bridge, the wood clacking against our sandals. How do you like being a housewife? Ray sighed. Maybe bringing up the kids wasn't such a good idea. Fuyumi's pretty easy to manage, but Tuya is so energetic I can barely keep up. I can't wait for him to start school in a few months. Though, it's been a lot better since you showed up. Maybe once Fuyumi starts school too we'd have more time to do things like this as well. Yeah, I nodded, letting my hand drop as I glanced at Ray's. Would it be too much to grab it? She had such soft hands and she always felt like the cool side of the pillow in the middle of summer. Well, I mean, there's nothing stopping us from going out more, is there? Ray gave a light pout, and pushed one of her curled strands of hair back. I can only leave the kids with my parents every so often, and Tuya wears them out too, so maybe once a month at best? Why don't we get a babysitter? I blinked and smiled. Actually, I think I know the perfect one. Oh, that smile is evil. Ray grabbed my arm and held onto it tight. Tell me more. All Might owes me. I'm willing to cash in those favors for a few more dates with you. She raised an eyebrow. Date? She asked, her smugness reaching peak levels. I don't think I ever called this a date. My blood went cold. Did I misread the situation? Did I misread playful banter as flirting? But I like the sound of that Enji, and I'd love to go on more dates with you. She reached down and grabbed my hand before leaning up and kissing my cheek softly. Her lips were cold. Just stop treating me like I'm going to run away. You're so afraid that you're going to treat me like Endeavor did. It feels like you're. Actually, I'm not. I'm actually naturally this timid. I laughed holding her hand tightly. Sorry, but really, treating you like Endeavor did not even cross my mind. Probably. I think a lot of random stuff and forget most of it. She blushed. Oh, well, I clearly misread things then, but don't be afraid to ask me for things. When we get home and watch our show can we cuddle? Ray nodded. I'd like that. Woo, cuddling. I was a master of breakfast. But when it came to making dinner, I was fairly certain the only thing I could truly make was rice or anything that was limited to boil water, put a thing in the boiled water. Which was largely limited to various kinds of pasta and vegetables. That wasn't to say I never made myself dinner, or that I just ate breakfast for dinner. I could operate a microwave just fine. Fortunately, Ray covered my weakness and then some. She was a whiz in the kitchen, effortlessly chopping vegetables, adding spices, grilling, and just general cooking things. What's more was that she made it look so effortless. She had a smile on her face and her white hair pulled into a ponytail that she had to know was a weakness of mine, which was only amplified by the fact that she was wearing shirts with a wider collar, exposing more of her neck while keeping her shoulders covered. Her gray eyes flashed to me and her smile grew again. You're staring at me again, Enji. She all but sung that sentence and wiggled her hips a bit before bumping me in the thigh. I was stubborn and stared at her harder, smiling even bigger for a moment before I turned and looked at the pot I had been told to stir slowly. With how adorable you look in an apron, how could I not? I'm adorable in my apron. Ray laughed and pushed on my shoulder to gesture towards the pink frilly apron I had purchased for myself, alongside a pair of fluffy pink slippers that Fuyumi absolutely loved. Hey, I never said I wasn't adorable too. I smiled, placing the spoon on the napkin to the side of the pot, and moved towards Ray, placing both hands around her waist for a moment before grabbing onto her hand. With one hand firmly on her back, I put my 2 dance classes, and countless hours dancing in the mirror before showering, to use. Even if the song playing on the speakers wasn't exactly romantic. Haha, you dork. Ray laughed following my awkward dance steps as we slow danced around the kitchen, our hips moving at awkward times from each other as we became an uncoordinated mess of laughter, spins and twirls. I held Ray close to my chest for a moment before spinning sharply, pulling her off the ground and making her shriek in excitement. I ended the spin by holding her hand, and giving her the mother of all dips. Ray placed a hand on her cheek and let out a flustered set of giggles. How does it feel getting swept off your feet by a dork? I asked, grinning ear to ear, still holding her so close. Even though tonight wasn't a date night, that didn't mean I couldn't attempt to romance Ray. Ray laughed again, kicking one leg then the other as her gray eyes sparked at me and her smile grew even more. Fantastic. She shook her head, laughing and smiling all the more. Completely and absolutely fantastic. Good, because I want to keep on sweeping you off your feet, each and every single day. Every day? She gave a sly raise of the eyebrows as she grabbed onto the back of my neck, a sensitive spot that had my entire body shiver in delight. Every single day. Seeing you smile is one of the most important things to me. It felt like we were growing closer, not just emotionally, but physically. Was I pulling her closer? Was she pulling herself close? Did it matter? Not really, but the why mattered a lot. Then, Ray's voice was more sultry than before, her eyes half open and a smile pulled on her lips as she tilted her head to the side just the slightest amount. How do you plan to sweep me off my feet next? Thankfully my mouth didn't say that part. I don't know, her fingers ran through my hair. I'll just do what comes naturally. Naturally, huh? Ray hummed, eyes closing, lips pursing. Our first kiss. I swallowed and leaned in, letting my hand on the back of Ray's back guide me forward while her fingers played with my hair. With my eyes closed, I could feel her more intensely. She smelled like spring and freshly cut vegetables. What are you guys doing? We both opened our eyes and turned our head to the side to see Tuya, covered head to toe in mud, and an even muddier Fuyumi hiding behind him. So this was why people said the kids killed the romance. Flirting, I responded, helping Ray up, her cheeks flushed red. I leaned in and gave her a kiss on the cheek. I'll take care of the kids. My hero, she gave a mock swoon and returned that kiss on the cheek. I'll be waiting for you to sweep me off my feet. Washing muddy children doesn't count. Nope. I smiled and tossed my apron back onto its hook. No way I was letting those two gremlins get that thing all muddied. They'd ruin the frills. Alright munchkins. Mind explaining why you're covered in mud? We wanted to build a snowman. Fuyumi flung her arms out wide, sending a splatter of mud onto the ground. Oops. I leaned down and picked Fuyumi up, ignoring the fact that she was basically half mud at this point. I clean my shirt later. But we didn't have any snow, Tuya said. But Fuyumi used her quirk. She's just like mom and can make snow. Oh really? I looked at Fuyumi, who nodded her head eagerly. Well then, you'll have to show me that later, but for now, we need to get both of you clean before your mom finishes cooking, right? Oh. Sorry mom. Tuya shouted, sticking his head back into the kitchen, leaving a muddied handprint on the side of the wall. I grabbed him by the collar and yoinked him up onto my shoulder. That was enough of a mess. I headed towards the bathroom and quickly stripped both kids of their clothes, and basically nuked the water buckets into being warm enough for both of them. Tuya just dumped his over his head like an animal, already scrubbing away the dirt. Fuyumi I was a bit more careful with, placing her on the seat and pouring just a bit of water down her back. She yelped. Right, didn't she prefer the cold? Or was it that she didn't deal with heat too well? You okay, Fuyumi? I asked, rubbing some of the dirt off her cheek. She nodded. It's hot. It's great. Tuya stood up on his stool and dumped more water onto his head. Dad always makes it just the right temperature. Hey, easy Tuya, don't play with the water. Why? Because I don't want to get wet. Fuyumi splashed me. A cheerful mud-covered grin on her face. I rubbed her white hair with red tips and gave a low growl. You're lucky you're cute. Fuyumi just giggled until I dumped more water on her and then started scrubbing her hair. After their bodies were mostly clean of dirt, I dunked them both into the tub for a quick soak. The Japanese way of bathing was actually kind of nice, even if I more often than not simply preferred to blast myself in the shower. There was just something so nice about soaking in a bath of hot water after already being clean. It was refreshing, delightful, and just oh so peaceful. So, I asked, looking at my two kids, why do you want to make a snowman? It's a movie mommy's been watching. Fuyumi bounced in the water. She took a deep breath and stuck her head completely under. Probably because she was a kid and kids were weird. She emerged gasping for air a second later. There's a snowman called Olaf in it. They were watching Frozen. Without me. I love that movie. Yeah. It's awesome. The Queen Lady, Elsa. She's just like mom. Tuya pointed a finger at me and poked my nose. And there's a moose just like you. How am I a moose? Tuya laughed, falling back into the tub and splashing water everywhere. I wasn't going to find an answer to my question, was I? Do you know the movie, Dad? Fuyumi asked, grabbing onto my arm and looking up at me with her large pale turquoise eyes. I nodded. Of course, it's one of my favorites. Fuyumi blinked and tilted her head to the side. Then do you think mommy is prettier than Elsa? Your mother is the most beautiful woman in the world to me, Fuyumi. She smiled up at me and sat back down in the tub and was quiet for the rest of the wash. I half expected Ray to be there listening in when Fuyumi asked that, but she must still be cooking. The rest of the night could be summed up by kids, cleaned. Family, fed. Kids, entertained. Kids, tucked in. in a chaotic mess of parenting that had my head spinning. Once everything was said and done, I fell into my nightly ritual of walking towards the TV room to watch the nightly episode or two with Ray. Sure, I enjoyed the show we were watching, but the real draw of the event was just being able to cuddle with Ray and the freedom that came with that act. She liked the random kisses I gave to the top of her head whenever there was a lull in the action, or just whenever I felt like, and each one of those was rewarded with her snuggling closer, or a light smile. So far our relationship was comfortably domestic. I found Ray already sitting on the couch, still dressed in her day clothes. A pleasant smile on her face as she stood to greet me. She took a few steps closer, eyes locked on mine. She grabbed my shirt and straightened it out ever so slightly. "Thanks for washing the kids today. It was a big help." "No problem," I laughed, wondering how exactly I could bring up what we were doing before that interruption. I still really wanted to kiss Ray. Hopefully they won't try to make Olaf out of mud again. Ray snorted a light laugh followed afterwards that just made her look all the more beautiful. Is that what they were doing? I knew Fuyumi was obsessed with him, but I didn't think it would be that bad. "Yep," and Chuya said I was Sven. "I can see that." I pouted for a second and then smiled, my hand going to Ray's shoulder as I found the mood getting to where it had been hours ago. "And Fuyumi said that you were like Elsa." I can see why she said that. Ray laughed, pulling her hair free from her ponytail. "Let it go, let it go. I don't give a fuck anymore," Ray half-sung before she broke out into laughter. "Sorry, I found that version on YouTube. It's been stuck in my head for a week."
"Is that what you've been humming?" I thought it sounded familiar. I laughed, her hands now on my shoulders, my own now on her hips as we took several small steps in a circle. A dance of mice so as to not wake the children, or at the very least to not make enough noise for them to come wandering out of bed.
I found it fitting. Ray tilted her head to the side, causing some of her long white hair to flow over her shoulder like a mithril stream. "So, what do you think, Enji? Am I like Elsa?" "Not at all." I pulled her close, grabbing her hand once again as we continued to spin softly in the living room. "You're far more beautiful, and smarter." "You're certainly good at flattery," Ray hummed despite the tinge of pink I could see growing on her ears. Her voice was low, barely a whisper, barely audible to anyone but me. But I doubt it'll be that easy to sweep me off my feet.
What happened to having low standards? You raised the bar.
Honestly, I'm flattered. I leaned down again, Ray standing on her tiptoes to meet me halfway. Our first real kiss was chaste, short, sweet, and everything I ever wanted from a kiss. It might sound cheesy, and it might have just confirmed what I wanted, but I think that I was completely in love with Ray. And it had only taken about 5 months to reach this point. Ray pushed away slowly, her eyes still closed, her hand on my chest as though to keep me back. I stood there watching her with a mixture of concern and delight on my face. She was being so cute about this, but, at the same time it was slightly off. She nodded to herself and smiled at me. "You really do kiss a lot differently than he did." "Ah," I blinked. "In a good way or a bad way?" "Good." Ray leaned in, placing her head against my chest. "Very, very, good." Even though his name was the Flame Hero, his kiss always felt cold, like there was no passion behind it. "But, yours?" "Well, I guess, they're just as sweet as you are." "I'm going to treasure that compliment for the rest of my life."
"You better." Ray playfully pushed away from me, smiling. "Hey Enji, did you drain the bath after you washed the kids?"
That was random. Yeah, they were real dirty." "Fiend." Ray placed both hands behind her back and took 2 awkward steps forward before looking back at me with a single eye that shined like silver in the moonlight. "Would you like to bathe with me?" Culture shock hit me hard with that statement. In America, the idea of bathing together completely and utterly naked was something that generally involved sex, either before, after, or even during. But in Japan, while the gesture between couples was indeed intimate, it wasn't as closely related to sex as in America. Washing each other was just a way of being open with each other, with the added bonus of relaxing with each other as well. Still, I could feel my cheeks burn and the room even grew brighter as my hair caught fire again. "Are you comfortable with me seeing you naked?" "Of course." Ray nodded, more comfort than I've ever been. 4x intimate. That's exactly what this act was. A mundane everyday chore that was turned into something much more enjoyable by the addition of someone special. Somehow the bath had turned from a simple washroom to a date. A date with an objective that was the same as any other date, to grow closer to each other, and to spend time with each other as well. Just with one big difference. Naked. Sure, I had a towel that was draped across my lap, but that wasn't real clothing. "You're so stiff, Enji," Ray snickered from behind me, the warm washcloth in her hand moving up and down my back, making me feel both vulnerable and safe and cared for all at once. It was nice. Really, really nice. I groaned, and glanced at the mirror so I could see Ray,
Her hair was wrapped up with a smaller washcloth while her body was covered by a large towel wrapped so tight it might as well be a dress. Please don't say it like that.
Ray gave a light giggle. She was much less nervous about all this than I thought she'd be. Sorry, you're just so fun to tease. She leaned forward and placed one hand on my shoulder, her eyes meeting mine in the mirror. It's not the first time I've done this, so please, let me show my appreciation. You don't really have to. I know, maybe, appreciation is the wrong word. She leaned back and started scrubbing my back again. How about affection? Besides, I want to. You're not the only one that wants to sweep the other of their feet, you know? Consider my feet thoroughly swept, and your back thoroughly cleaned. I turned and glanced back towards Ray. Would you like me to do yours? Her cheeks went slightly red and her mouth opened and then closed. Apparently her offensive ability to tease my socks off did not come with strong defenses. Yes. She sat down on the stool next to mine and we shifted around, careful not to expose ourselves to each other, for some odd reason. Or at least I was. Ray was less reluctant. When her towel fell to the side, exposing her slender back, I saw it. Her scars. Scars from the surgeries. Endeavor knew they were there, but had never bothered to learn what each one was for. One was from her first surgery, the one that had forced her into being so desperate as to marry him. The second and third had happened after the wedding. 2 were along her ribcage, 1 along her abdomen. Sorry, they're ugly. Ray muttered. What are the scars? Oh, I wasn't sure how to respond to that. I'm not going to lie and say they're beautiful, but they're not ugly. Besides, they're proof that you survived, right? Ray snorted and placed her face into both of her hands. You're so cheesy. And proud of it. Now I'm going to start washing, all right? She nodded again. I was gentle, perhaps more so than I had been with Fuyumi and Tuya, but kids were kids. They'd whine at a harsh bath but also learn that mud was a poor substitute for snow. Ray wiggled a bit and let out a long sigh. That feels so good. Remind me to rub your shoulders sometime, sold. I stared at her scars again. Do you have any other surgeries? None planned. Ray commented, a smile pulling on her cheeks. Our eyes met in the mirror again. I've been clean since before we had Fuyumi, but they still want to monitor me just in case. Well, I hope you're done with it for a while. Ray nodded, humming in delight at my light touch as I rubbed her shoulders and back with the cloth. It's been nice. Once Ray's back and arms were cleaned, we both stood. I stared at the large bath in the corner. It had fit both Fuyumi and Tuya in it earlier, but now, it felt rather small. Then again, I was a rather large dude. But Ray was rather small. The steaming water looked wonderful though, and whatever minerals Ray had put into caused it to be just opaque enough that I couldn't see the bottom. You get in first, I'll find room. Ray pushed me on the arm, her own face as red as mine felt. I nodded and lumbered towards the bath, tossing my towel to the side and submerging myself in the water, the bath water flowing over and going into the drain in the center of the floor. I eased myself in and let out a long sigh that let my body melt into the water. I closed my eyes and smiled. This was a great idea. I heard Ray enter the water, and I kept my eyes shut as long as I could, and I only opened them when I felt her head rest against my chest. You're right, Ray hummed, rolling her head to the side just a bit. Her hand went to her shoulder and she gave it a light rub. Maybe we should go to a proper spa sometime. I reached for her shoulders and started to rub small circles with my thumbs. Ray practically melted. Thank you, 1 semester of electives. Your birthday's next month, right? I can set you up with a day spa pass, and I'll watch the kids. That sounds nice. Ray half moaned, head lolling to the side again. But, wanna know sounds even better? What? Getting All Might to babysit again, while we go on a spa date. Spending time with you and tormenting All Might? That's like 2 of my favorite things. You can thank me later. After our soak was over, we had just enough time to get dressed in our comfiest pajamas and watch a single episode of our show. We watched 3 and fell asleep on the couch again. Make sure you come back, alright? Ray grabbed my collar with both hands, pulling herself up while pulling me down so that she could plant a tender kiss on my cheek that I knew I was going to be thinking about all day. She leaned back down, a smile gracing her lips, preferably in one piece. I smiled, reaching for her cheek and then kissing her on her forehead in what had become a very important part of my mornings. I could skip breakfast, I could even forget my hero costume, but there was no way I was missing my morning goodbye kiss from Ray. I will. Papa. Fuyumi jumped, her arms outstretched and her hair was all kinds of crazy. And Fuyumi made sure I never got to leave without giving her one too. I picked her up and rubbed my nose against hers, causing her to giggle and laugh at my touch before I sat her back down. And remember, we're meeting with Tuya's school tomorrow, so no surprise week-long trips with All Might again. Ray patted Fuyumi on her head and raised a single white eyebrow at me. I rolled my own eyes and smiled, one hand on my hip for optimal sass. Don't worry, I'd rather be here with you. I looked down at Fuyumi and the kids, then go off on another adventure with all might. Though, there was a chance I might have to. I much preferred my domestic life than my hero life. Perhaps if I moved forward enough, and did my part in making Japan safer and more peaceful, then I could spend more time with my family. That's a good thing, Ray said, placing a finger on my chest and smiling. Besides, I have something I want to talk to you about later. Now go. Fine, I'll see you later. Bye Fuyumi, bye Papa. I made my way towards UA for the first time in a while. Chilled December air bit at my face and I wondered what I should do for Christmas. Ray's birthday had been a success with both of us thoroughly enjoying a trip to the spa. My entire body had never felt so clean, refreshed, and stretched. It was so nice it felt like I'd never have to step into a bath again. But I still willingly followed Ray in there from time to time. I felt a bit of stiffness in my neck that had developed from the last time we had fallen asleep on the couch and wondered if Ray would be okay with another spa date as her Christmas present, or if I should get something else. Fuyumi and Tuya were easy and already set. Ray was a bit tricky. Maybe I should get something for the whole family? Even though I was running out of time before Christmas, I needed to put this on the back burner for today. Besides, I should just ask Ray what she wanted. But damn it. I loved surprising her. Gah. Being married was hard. In theory, it was cheaper and faster to take the train, but the American in me demanded that I drive everywhere. Besides, it was better than being stared at or having people gossip that Endeavor was riding the train. Not that it was bad gossip or anything, it was just strange feeling everyone's eyes on me. Besides, part of me wanted to keep my visits to UA at least somewhat discreet. I was going to go meet with the #1 pro hero and some animal that had gotten a quirk, to start scheming about the future and how we can make things better. Halfway through my drive a thought rang through my head that made a pig grow in my stomach. It was something that Ray said. Something that she had been saying, and the way she said it. Telling me to come back, specifically me, the way she said that you, really had me thinking. Was she afraid of Endeavor coming back? The roar of my car reminded me that I had a habit of speeding when I was distressed. I had no idea how, or why, I had ended up in this situation, but I shared Ray's fears. I didn't want to just suddenly leave her, especially not like that. Feeling powerless over my own life was something familiar to me, though, of late, I hadn't been feeling it. Shaking my head I cleared myself of that thought, though the feeling remained for a bit. I wanted to hug Ray. She could probably make that feeling go away. Still, nothing to do for it now. Just another reason to want to return home besides my inner homebody not wanting to go out and deal with people. Even if they were technically my friends. But as always, Nezu had kept both myself and All Might in the dark about what they were going to be talking about today. Hopefully it was something light, and not the inevitable encounter with All for One. I drove through the UA checkpoint, my car already registered with the gate, and I was able to proceed into the faculty parking lot. In the privacy of my own car I sat and tried to gather my thoughts. What were we going to do about All for One? What was I going to do? It was All Might's intent, his goal, his dream, to fight and defeat All for One once and for all. The list of crimes that man had committed was long and varied. There was no doubt that he was a true villain. One I couldn't talk out of becoming a villain like I maybe did with Rikia. What can I do against him? I kind of liked my quirk, and risking All for One stealing such a simple and powerful quirk wasn't ideal. Fire support? I might hurt All Might. Maybe some gear that could handle extreme heats could allow me to be more accurate. Worth a consideration. But really, All Might have to do most of the heavy lifting. Maybe Gran Torino had some tips on how to fight one for all. I'm not sure how much he actually fought when Nana died, but he was able to fight during that United States of Smash scene. What was it called again? Camino? Like the Star Wars place? Blah. It's been like half a year and I was already starting to forget things about the manga. It was a good thing I told Nezu everything I could. As I made my way towards the main building, a rather large student came running towards me nearly at full sprint. With his wide frame and 4 arms it was quite intimidating, and the shaved bald head made him look a bit like a punk. Or a bit like Inasa. Please don't tell me this was like his father or something. Endeavor, sir. The large student came to a sliding stop, nearly losing his balance thanks to a small puddle from the recent rainstorms. His 4 arms flailed and I caught him stopping him from falling, and just watched as he attempted to right himself. Thank you sir, He blinked, then jumped back and bowed at the waist. Endeavor sir. I'm Fuso Kaido. I was hoping that you'd allow me to intern with you this spring. I feel like there's a lot I can learn from you and… Why me? I blinked, pointing a finger at myself. Because, not only are you the #2 pro hero, but you're also handling things in a kind way. He continued to bow, all 4 hands on his hips. And I'd be honored to have you mentor me for my final year at UA. Sure, submit an application and I'll approve it. He looked up at me with tears in his eyes. "Oh, thank you, sir. I promise you won't regret this. I'll become the most chivalrous hero you've ever seen." Right, I'll help you with that. But, Fuso, what's your hero name? I asked, placing a hand on the kid's shoulder. Never had an intern before. Sure, I had a TA, but they were older than me at the time. Besides, I could use some help. "I go by Fourth Kind, sir." He bowed again. "Thank you for this chance. I'll go talk to Kendo-sensei right away." Before I could say another word, he was off running, and I was left wondering if I made the right choice. Honestly, given how often I had been to UA, I would have thought I'd been asked for this sooner. With a shrug, I continued on my way towards the meeting. I found Nezu, All Might, and someone else waiting for me in the room. It was easy to recognize him thanks to his extra tall nature, green and yellow hair, and a dour look that made my own resting bitch face look like a smile. Mirai, something or other, Sir Night-Eye, All Might's future sidekick. Yo. I raised my hand and gave a light wave of the wrist and looked towards All Might and Nezu. Mirai walked towards. The 4 inches he had on me felt more like a foot. He looked me up and down and adjusted his glasses. "How are you able to change things so easily?" Huh? I tilted my head to the side and glanced towards Nezu, who just shrugged. That was helpful. Shrugging was my thing. His thing was not shrugging and being smart. "Did you force yourself in here because of a vision or something?" HMPH, he smiled and extended a hand towards me. "Hardly. I also came here to offer my services to All Might and become his sidekick," he agreed. I glanced towards All Might. "You said he was going to be my sidekick anyways, and he is graduating UA this spring, so I accepted." Toshinori gave a large shrug. Why was everyone but me shrugging? This felt unfair. Besides, his quirk is impressive for a lot of things. "And yet you break it." Miria continued to glare at me. "How?" It was less a question and more a demand. I rolled my eyes and sat down on the small single chair that flanked the couches that Nezu and All Might were occupying. "Mirai, look, if I'm honest, I trust you. In part because All Might trusts you, but also because I know the man you turn into and I can respect his character." Mirai's eyes went wide and he scrambled to sit opposite of me. The seat was a bit too low for his long legs, so he looked like an awkward crab. I knew it. "You're from the future. That's how you're able to change things, isn't that?" "Not quite." Nezu raised up his hand and silenced Mirai for the moment. While it would be humorous to listen to Enji stumble his way through explaining things yet again, allow me to summarize. He wasn't originally Endeavor, but has taken over his body with information on the future. "I trust that you will keep this information a secret, yes?" Mirai glanced towards All Might. "How much does he know?" All Might gave a great big laugh. Haha, at first, he knew more than even I did. But don't worry, my boy. I can assure you that Enji's heart is in the right place. Right. I waved my hand before All Might could praise me more. If I wanted red cheeks, I'd be spending time with Ray. Actually, I just wanted to do that. "Welcome to the future squad. Leave your sizes with Nezu and he'll get your jacket ordered." "Jacket?" he asked. "Joke." He smiled, leaning back in his seat and folding one leg over his knee. "Ah, I see. I'll take that in that he thought I was funny." "So, Nezu, what did you call us here for?" I finally asked. "You mentioned wanting to talk about something." "Of course." Nezu clapped his hands and reached down to take a sip of his tea. It used to be kind of cute watching him use both paws to hold the cup. "Ah, excellent tea, Mirai. Now then, I believe it's a good idea to have a check-in more frequently so we can understand where we're. I understand our goals are years if not decades in the making, but progress reports would still be helpful. On my end, I've made some progress with tracking the doctor you mentioned, as well as some progress in searching for All for One. We know that he's still in Japan, which is good. However, he's been less active of late," Nezu continued. "I'll be relying on Mirai here to assist with those efforts. But, first and foremost, there is an upcoming event that you two need to get a good grasp on." "Event? I couldn't think of a damn thing that happened around this time." "Ah, you mean the top hero billboard rankings, right?" Toshinori leaned forward and glanced towards me. "You and I are going to be at the top. We'll be asked to give our thoughts on the rankings and maybe a bit of a speech while we accept a reward. It's quite nice." "Do I have to go?" I half-whined, slinking into my chair. "Yes." Nezu took another sip of tea. "Damn, that event sounded way too peoply for my tastes." "It's a great opportunity for you to spread your message." Nezu gave a light stretch and hopped up onto the couch, waddling over towards me and looking right at me with his beady black eyes. "You see, I'm certain that you'll be asked about your recent quirk rights mentality, and I know that you tend to speak before thinking. I was being lectured by a rodent. So, we're going to take the time to make certain that when you deliver your speech, that it strikes a chord, that it is something that will resonate." Nezu turned towards All Might. "And you'll be backing him up as the #1 pro hero." "Great, So I was going to be giving a persuasive speech in front of millions of people, likely on live television. Great. Just great. Well, hopefully I'll be able to put my writing skills to use. 4XI gave a light yawn as I stumbled into the living room to find Ray already waiting for me. The cleansing waters of the shower were a far cry from the much more pleasant act of bathing with Ray, but doing that every night might ruin the magic of the event. Though, part of me doubted that. Still, there was something about catching her in a long shirt that went well past her hips and a pair of pajama bottoms. It was the kind of sight that was equal parts cute and beautiful. She caught me staring and smiled at me, grabbing the large fleece blanket and preparing it for maximum cuddles. Which was just what I needed after today. Sorry for coming home so late. I stumbled over and sat down in my usual spot, where Ray sprung, wrapping the blanket around both of us in an expert move and already pulling me into a light hug that would rest for the rest of the night. Her head was on my chest, her hand on the back of my neck. And suddenly everything became worth it all over again. Don't worry so much, at least you came home. She leaned up and gave me another one of those light soft kisses that I'd be thinking about all night. I kind of figured that the boys might keep you longer, that's why I just ordered sushi. She gave a light wink. What did you have? All might. Really, it was Nezu. Wanted another burger, so we ate at the usual spot again. I missed burritos. Honestly, I'm slightly jealous. Ray gave a light wink and started our show before she settled down, her head barely peeking out of the blanket, my hand on her hip, pinky finger all but groping her butt. When it came to the weather, Ray couldn't stand the heat. In the winter she'd barely flinch at walking out into the freezing cold. But when it came to sleeping and cuddling, she preferred to be warm. Which was great, because she was like the cool side of the pillow that never got too hot. I can take you sometime, with or without the kids. I shifted slightly, entering a position for maximum comfort, our show coming on, and I had to force myself to really pay attention to it and not spending the whole night looking at Ray, again. That sounds like a good idea. I smiled and then blinked as a thought entered my mind. Oh, hey, what do you want for Christmas? She tilted her head and looked up at me. Christmas? Yeah. She tapped on her chin, making her look extra cute for a few seconds. A bed. The simplicity of her answer made me snort. Even if a bed was expensive, it was a bit on the mundane side. You know, you can ask for something else. If you want a new bed, we can just get you a new one. Then, how about we go bed shopping together, and your Christmas present is letting me pick out whatever bed I want. My inner frugal was cringing at the thought. Sure, sounds fine. It was such a strange request. Was her bed that bad? Was she having problems sleeping? What about you? Ray asked, leaning up again to look me in the eyes. What do you want for Christmas? A virgin killer sweater she had to wear. Or hell, I'd wear one for the fuck of it and scar my children. Wait. I should save that for when they're older. Maximum embarrassment. Like when Tuya brings their first girlfriend over. Just show up cooking butt ass naked in a VKS. I hadn't really thought of it. I answered half honestly as I tried to shove my weird thought into the dark depths of my mind. Good. Ray perked up and kissed me on the cheek. Then let me surprise you, alright? Should I be scared? Yep. Great, looking forward to it, thanks.